What if the oldest maps of heaven were not drawn for the living but for the dead? You stand in the quiet light of a museum gallery, where glass cases hold things that once belonged to tombs, temples, and hands long turned to dust. A clay tablet rests under a careful label. A painted coffin panel shows eyes staring forever into a dark room. A strip of funerary text curls with signs that once had to be spoken correctly, gently, and at the right moment. Archaeologists have brushed soil from these objects. Historians have compared their words. Museum curators have placed them beneath soft lamps, hoping order can be made from fragments. And yet, some questions remain strangely awake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the room grows still around you, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what the local time is where you are. It is a small ritual of our own, a way of knowing that somewhere, under another ceiling, another person is awake beside the same ancient darkness. You look again at the objects behind the glass. They do not shout. They do not promise a secret that suddenly explains everything. They simply wait. A tablet from Mesopotamia, pressed with wedge-shaped signs, a papyrus from Egypt, crowded with painted gods, boats, gates, and words of passage. A stone relief where a winged figure raises one hand before a doorway. Each artifact belongs to a different land, a different language, a different world of thought, but each one seems to lean toward the same unsettling idea. The soul, whatever the ancients believed it to be, and did not simply vanish. It travelled. In many old traditions, the dead did not enter a vague mist or a simple empty sky. They moved through structure. They crossed thresholds. They passed doors. They answered beings who stood in shadow. They carried names, offerings, memories, and sometimes secret words. Heaven was not always imagined as one bright place above the clouds. Sometimes it was layered. Sometimes it had halls, courts, rivers, ladders, fields, stars, and gates. The journey after death was not only emotional, it was architectural. The number 7 appears again and again in ancient imagination, especially across the Near East. 7 sages, 7 heavens, 7 planets known to the old sky watchers, 7 gates, 7 divine powers, 7 steps, 7 sealed spaces. In Mesopotamian literature, the goddess Inanna passes through 7 gates during her descent into the underworld, surrendering part of her royal clothing at each threshold. That story is not a journey through heaven, but it reveals something important about how ancient people pictured sacred passage. A gate was never only a gate. It was a place where identity changed. Later traditions, from Jewish apocalyptic writings to early Christian, Islamic, and mystical cosmologies, sometimes spoke of layered heavens, each with its own order, beings, and mysteries. Scholars remain careful with these comparisons, because the traditions are not all the same, and they developed across different centuries, languages, and theological worlds. Still, the pattern is hard to ignore. Many ancient people imagined the universe as arranged, guarded, and divided. To move from Earth to the highest realm meant passing through a sequence. Perhaps that is why the idea of 7 gates still feels ancient even when no single civilization gives us one perfect, complete map. The record is fragmentary. A tablet breaks in the middle of a sentence. A papyrus loses its edge. A tomb painting survives while the spoken ritual that once gave it meaning disappears. Museums preserve the visible remains, but the invisible parts are harder to keep. The breath of the priest, the fear of the mourner, the whispered name of the dead, the belief that a soul might stand at a door and not know what to say. You imagine your hand resting lightly on the cool rail before the glass. Beyond it, a small amulet shaped like an eye glows green in the dimness. Such objects were not decorations in the modern sense. In Egypt, Amulets could be placed on the body to protect, guide, or restore power to the deceased. The Book of the Dead, known more accurately as a collection of funerary spells rather than a single fixed book, offered words for passing dangers in the afterlife. Some spells named gates, guardians, and portals. Some gave the dead person language to move safely through realms that were beautiful, frightening, and morally charged. But even here, certainty softens. Scholars still debate how widely these texts were understood by ordinary people, how literally the images were taken, and how much changed between temple theology, elite burial practice, and popular belief. A richly painted papyrus might tell us what a wealthy person hoped for in death, but it cannot fully tell us what a farmer, a servant, a child, or a grieving mother imagined when the night grew quiet. The journey of the soul was not preserved equally for everyone. That imbalance itself becomes part of the mystery. The ancient dead who speak most clearly are often the dead who could afford to be heard. Kings, nobles, priests, scribes, and wealthy families left tombs, inscriptions, and commissioned images. Their souls were guided with written words. Their bodies were surrounded by ritual care. Yet across the world, people without monuments also dreamed of continued existence. They poured offerings into the earth. They buried food, tools, beads, shells, and small personal objects. They kept the dead close through memory, even when no scripture survived. Some have wondered whether the idea of heavenly gates grew not only from religion, but from the experience of ancient cities themselves. To enter a powerful city, you passed walls, you met guards, you crossed a threshold from wilderness into order. Palaces had courtyards, temples had restricted chambers. Ordinary people could see the outer spaces, while deeper rooms belonged to priests and gods. It is possible that the heavens were imagined through the same pattern. The soul rose as a visitor to the most sacred city of all, passing from outer darkness toward inner light, and yet a curious fringe possibility lingers at the edge of the thought. What if some gate traditions preserved not a simple metaphor, but an older ritual memory of initiation, dream travel, or trance? In temple sleep practices, in visionary journeys, in chants spoken at night, some living people may have believed they glimpsed the roads of the dead before death arrived. The 7 gates, in this reading, might not be only a funerary map. They might also be a map of transformation, a way the living rehearsed surrender. You do not need to accept that as fact to feel its quiet pull. The oldest records rarely give themselves completely. They open a door, then leave the corridor dark, so you remain in the museum, looking at the small objects that survived. Clay, stone, ink, linen, gold, bone. Each is silent, but none feels empty. Somewhere behind them is an ancient question that no label can finish. If the soul had to travel, who taught it the road? If heaven had gates, who built them in the human imagination? And if 7 thresholds waited beyond the last breath, what was left behind at the first one? The gallery light dims in your mind. The glass softens into night. The museum floor becomes packed earth beneath your feet. A slow wind moves through dry reeds, far away. A river carries moonlight past the sleeping banks. You're no longer only looking at the fragments, you are beginning to walk inside them. The first thing you notice is not the sky, but the ground. It is firm beneath your feet, baked by the day and cooling slowly under evening air. Dust clings to your sandals. It gathers at the edges of your robe, at your ankles, in the small lines of your skin. The river is close enough that you can smell its damp breath beneath the dry scent of reeds and clay. Somewhere beyond the bank, frogs begin their thin night music. Somewhere nearer, smoke rises from a small fire where resin and brushwood burn together, making the air sweet, bitter, and faintly medicinal. You're standing at the edge of an ancient world, not yet inside the gate, but near enough to feel that a journey has begun. In the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, people learned to build with mud because mud was what the rivers gave them. They pressed clay into bricks, dried them in the sun, and raised homes, walls, shrines, and platforms from the same earth that flooded and cracked with the seasons. The great cities of Sumer, places such as Uruk, Ur, Eridu, and Nippur, were not imagined out of empty space. They rose from irrigation, labour, grain, temple authority, and the careful recording of offerings, fields, animal, and names. The soul, in such a world, could hardly be imagined without earth. You feel this as you walk past low buildings whose walls hold the last warmth of sunset. A potter's yard has gone quiet. The scent of wet clay still lingers near shallow basins where hands have been working all day. A reed mat hangs over a doorway. A dog lifts its head and watches without barking. Overhead, the first stars appear, small and patient, as if the heavens are not far away, but simply waiting for the right hour to reveal their pattern. The ancients didn't separate sky and soil as neatly as modern minds often do. The earth fed the body, the heavens ordered the seasons, the underworld received the dead. The river could give life in spring and carry away a house in flood. Everything moved in cycles, and so it is possible that the soul's journey was first felt as another kind of cycle, not a straight road upward, but a passage through forces older than memory. In Mesopotamian belief, the afterlife was often described in somber terms. The dead went to a shadowed realm, sometimes imagined as a great house from which no one returned in ordinary human form. Dust, darkness, and stillness appear in descriptions of the netherworld. This is very different from later images of shining heaven, and scholars continue to debate how these beliefs varied across time, city, social class, and ritual context. Some texts seem bleak, others suggest that proper burial, offerings, and remembrance could improve the condition of the dead. You pause beside a canal, where black water reflects a narrow band of stars. The surface barely moves. Along its edge, reeds whisper against one another in the night wind. You can imagine why ancient people saw thresholds everywhere. A riverbank is a threshold between land and water. Twilight is a threshold between day and night. A doorway is a threshold between public life and the hidden family room. The body itself becomes a threshold when breath leaves it. Before a soul could approach any heavenly gate, it had to be separated from ordinary life. That separation was not sudden in ancient ritual. It unfolded through washing, wrapping, lamenting, carrying, burying, feeding, and remembering. In Egypt, the body was preserved with extraordinary care when resources allowed, because the body, name, shadow, heart, and spiritual aspects of the person were all tied into the hope of continued existence. In Mesopotamia, burial and ongoing offerings mattered deeply, because the dead could be imagined as needing sustenance from the living. You sense the weight of that responsibility. Your family does not simply say farewell. They maintain a relationship across an unseen border. They pour water. They leave food. They speak the name. They fear neglect. They hope the dead will be peaceful and not restless. There is an unusual thought hidden inside this care, one that some modern interpreters have treated with curiosity. If the dead required offerings, then memory itself became a kind of nourishment. To be forgotten was not only sad, it was dangerous. It may suggest that the earliest gates of the soul were social before they were celestial. A person passed first through the gate of being remembered or abandoned, long before shining heavens were described in layered detail. The soul may have depended on the living to hold open a path, yet the record is uncertain. Archaeologists can uncover grave goods, burial positions, tomb architecture, and traces of ritual meals. But they cannot always know what mourners believed in the private chambers of grief. A bowl placed near a body might be food for the dead, a symbol of care, a marker of status, or all of these at once. A bead might be decoration, protection, identity, or memory. The object remains still, The meaning trembles. You continue walking, and the settlement thins behind you. The night opens wider. The smell of livestock fades. The river sound grows softer. Ahead, on a rise of land, you see the outline of a sacred platform, not yet the towering image people often imagine, but a raised place that separates divine space from ordinary ground. Temples in ancient Mesopotamia were not only houses of worship, they were centers of economy, authority, storage, ritual, and cosmic order. The god or goddess of the city was not abstract in the way later philosophy might imagine divinity. The deity had a house, possessions, attendants, meals, festivals, and a place in the rhythm of civic life. If the gods had houses, then perhaps heaven had architecture. This idea follows you like a soft footstep. The 7 gates may not have begun as a single doctrine. They may be a weaving together of many older habits of thought: city walls, temple chambers, royal courts, star paths, initiation rites, and funerary fears. Some have wondered whether ancient descriptions of gates reflect real ritual movement through sacred spaces, whether living passed from outer courtyards into more restricted zones, surrendering ordinary identity step by step. It is only a possibility, but it fits the feeling of the landscape around you. You climb the low rise. The air is cooler here. Beneath your palm, the mud brick of a wall feels rough, crumbly, and alive with the memory of hands that shaped it. No gate stands open yet. No guardian speaks. Only the stars gather overhead in their slow arrangement. And in that silence, you begin to understand why the soul's road could not start in the sky. It had to begin here, among dust, water, smoke, and clay, where human beings first learned that every house has an entrance, every city has a wall, every temple has an inner room, and every life eventually reaches a boundary no one can cross unchanged. The tablet is small enough to fit in your hand, but the road inside it feels endless. You imagine it resting on a low wooden table beneath the trembling light of an oil lamp. The clay has dried to the colour of old bread. Its surface is crowded with wedge marks, pressed there by a reed stylus while the clay was still soft. Each sign looks simple from a distance, almost like the track of a bird crossing wet earth, but to the scribe who made it, and to the trained eyes that might read it later, the marks held names, offerings, omens, royal deeds, hymns, laments, and stories of gods who crossed boundaries no human body could survive. Ancient records do not come to you as whole books. Not at first, they come as fragments. A corner of a tablet, a damaged line, a myth copied by a student centuries after its first telling, a funerary spell written for one person, then adapted for another, a priestly instruction whose ritual setting has vanished, a broken list of divine names, a phrase that mentions a gate, but not what stood beyond it. You lean closer in the lamplight, and the clay seems almost warm. In Mesopotamia, writing began largely as a practical system for accounting, administration, and temple economy. Grain, sheep, beer, labour, land, and offerings all had to be counted. But over time, the same script carried myths, prayers, incantations, royal inscriptions, wisdom texts, and scholarly commentaries. The scribal world was both practical and sacred. A sign could record a delivery of barley, or it could preserve the name of a god believed to govern a hidden region of existence. This mixture matters. When ancient people described the soul's journey, they did so in societies where record-keeping itself carried power. To name a thing was to hold it in memory. To list a god was to place that god within an ordered cosmos. To write a spell was to give the spoken word a body that might outlast the speaker. You pass your attention from Mesopotamia to Egypt, and the texture changes. Clay becomes papyrus. Reed stylus becomes brush. The dim schoolroom becomes a painted tomb, where images move across plaster walls. There, the dead person does not drift without help. They carry words. They carry scenes. They stand before gates with names. They meet guardians whose forms can be strange and severe. In some versions of Egyptian funerary literature, the deceased must know the names of doorways, keepers, and divine beings in order to move safely through the next world. The Egyptian Book of the Dead was not a single fixed book in the modern sense, but a collection of spells selected and arranged in different ways for different people. Some copies were richly illustrated, others were simpler, some were written on papyrus. Some ideas also appeared on tomb walls, coffins, amulets, and other burial objects. The texts were meant to assist the dead, but scholars continue to debate how different communities understood them, how they were performed, and whether ordinary Egyptians thought of these scenes as literal geography, symbolic protection, ritual theatre, or all of these at once. You can feel that uncertainty in the painted darkness. A gate in a funerary text is not like a gate in a modern map. It is a place, a test, a being, a name, and a transformation. The dead person may need to speak correctly. They may need to be morally prepared. They may need help from gods, charms, or memory. The gate is not only blocking the road, it is listening. Now your attention drifts farther, into later traditions that describe the heavens in layers. Jewish apocalyptic writings speak at times of heavenly ascents, angelic orders, divine palaces, and visionary journeys. Early Christian texts, late antique mystical writings, and Islamic traditions also preserve layered images of heaven, though they do not all agree in number, structure, or meaning. The idea of 7 heavens becomes especially powerful in several religious worlds, shaped by astronomy, theology, inherited symbolism, and the visible order of the wandering planets known to ancient skywatchers. But you must move carefully here. Similarity is not sameness. A Sumerian underworld gate, an Egyptian portal in the afterlife, a Jewish heavenly palace, and a later mystical ascent may all share the language of passage, but each belongs to its own setting. The record does not give one uninterrupted doctrine running unchanged from the first cities to later faiths. It gives echoes, patterns, borrowings, transformations, and human attempts to imagine what cannot be seen. Still, the echoes are difficult to ignore. In one place, the soul descends and must surrender signs of power. In another, the dead must pass gatekeepers by speaking sacred names. In another, a visionary rises through heavens populated by angels, stars, winds, and divine storehouses. In another, heaven is arranged as a court, with records, judgment, and beings assigned to particular thresholds. Across these traditions, the afterlife is not empty, it is organized. Some have wondered whether this organization reflects ancient bureaucracy as much as ancient belief. The same societies that developed kingship, temples, scribes, tax records, granaries, legal contracts, and royal courts also imagine divine worlds with order, rank, and procedure. The soul entered not a dream without shape, but a sacred administration. It had to be recognized. It had to be admitted. It might be questioned. It might be weighed. This curious idea has a fringe edge, but not an unreasonable root. Perhaps heavenly gates are what happens when human beings look at their own systems of authority and project them into eternity. Or perhaps the opposite feels true to ancient minds. Earthly authority may have been modelled on a divine order believed to exist first. The king's gate mirrored the god's gate. The temple court mirrored the court of heaven. The scribe's list mirrored a cosmic list no mortal eye could see in full. You sit with that thought as the lamp flame bends. A broken tablet cannot tell you whether its writer believed every image literally. A painted papyrus cannot reveal whether fear, hope, ritual habit, and poetic imagination were separate in the mind of the dead person's family. Scholars remain divided on many details, especially when trying to reconstruct belief from elite texts, damaged manuscripts, and later copies of older traditions. The ancient world left clues, but not a single key. And perhaps that is why the fragments feel alive. They do not give you a complete map of the 7 gates. They give you pieces of a map that must be held gently. One piece is made of clay, smelling faintly of dust and rain, long evaporated. One is made of papyrus, thin as breath. One is carved in stone, hard enough to survive a fallen city. One exists only as a copied line in a later manuscript, translated from one sacred language into another. Together they suggest that human beings have long imagined the soul as a traveller through ordered mystery. Outside the room, night deepens, the lamp oil lowers, the reed stylus lies still beside the tablet. Somewhere beyond the wall, a dog barks once, then silence returns. You understand now that the road to the 7 gates cannot be entered through certainty. It begins with fragments, with careful reading, with missing lines, with symbols that shift across cultures. You're not holding a finished doctrine. You're holding scattered signs from people who believed the dead needed guidance, and that beyond the visible world there were doors. The first gate does not appear with thunder. It waits in a low place between shadow and starlight, where the road narrows and the air grows cooler against your face. Behind you are the fields, the houses, the riverbank, the smoke of cooking fires, the last human voices fading into night. Ahead, the darkness has form. It is not a wall exactly, and not a doorway exactly, but a threshold where the soul begins to feel the strange weight of being known. You come toward it slowly, as ancient people might have imagined the dead approaching the first boundary beyond ordinary life, not yet judged in full, not yet cleansed, not yet raised toward the highest light. First, there is the question of identity. Who are you when the body's gone? The thought is simple, but it opens like a hidden chamber. In many ancient cultures, a name was not merely a label, it carried presence, memory, legal standing, family connection, and sometimes spiritual force. In Egypt, the name was one of the essential parts of the person. To preserve the name of the dead was to help preserve the dead themselves. Tomb inscriptions, offering formulas, statues, and painted scenes often worked together to keep a person socially and ritually alive. Even when the body rested in darkness, the name could still be read, spoken and offered to. You feel the seriousness of that belief as you stand before the first gate. The stone beneath your feet is cold now. A faint scent of mineral dust rises from it, mixed with the dry sweetness of old incense. Somewhere, water drips slowly, though you cannot see its source. Each drop sounds like a syllable being tested. The first gate asks for the name, not in a loud voice, not as a command from a throne. It asks in silence, by existing. You understand that no soul can travel without some form of recognition. To pass from one realm to another, you must be identified. You must be more than a shadow. You must carry a thread that ties you to life, to memory, to the people who knew your face, to the hands that washed your body, to the voices that spoke over your grave. In Mesopotamia, the dead could become restless if not properly buried or remembered. Families made offerings to deceased ancestors, and the relationship between living and dead continued in domestic and ritual practice. The details changed across time and place, and scholars still discuss how these rites were understood by different communities. But the general idea remains powerful. The dead were not fully cut off. They remained part of an order that required names, duties, and care. You imagine a family kneeling in a dim room. A bowl is placed near the ground. Water is poured. A name is spoken. The act is ordinary and enormous at once. A living mouth gives shape to the absent one. A sound passes into the air and becomes a small bridge. Perhaps this is why the first gate feels less like a barrier than a memory test. Not only for the soul, but for the world left behind. There is a curious fringe thought that has followed certain interpretations of ancient gate imagery. Some have wondered whether the first threshold was not simply about personal identity, but about a hidden record, a celestial register, in which souls were matched to names, lineages, deeds, and divine assignments. This idea appears in different forms in later religious imagination, where books of life, heavenly tablets, and divine records become important symbols. It would be too much to claim that all these ideas descend from one source. The evidence does not allow such certainty. Yet the recurring image of cosmic record-keeping is striking. The ancient world was full of lists. King lists, offering lists, temple inventories, legal records, genealogies, astronomical observations, names of gods, names of fields, names of workers, names of the dead. To a society shaped by writing, a written name could feel almost like a second body, fragile in clay or ink, yet capable of surviving the skin. You step close to the gate. Its surface seems made of dark stone, but when the starlight touches it, you notice shallow marks like worn writing. They are not readable at first. They move between scripts, as if the gate has gathered the signs of many peoples, cuneiform wedges, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Aramaic letters, Greek forms, marks you cannot place. The effect is not dramatic. It is almost quiet enough to miss. The gate does not speak one language. It waits beneath all languages. And here the mystery deepens. If the soul must be named, what happens to those whose names are lost? Archaeologists uncover countless burials without inscriptions, bones arranged carefully, bodies wrapped or placed with objects, graves marked only by earth, stone, or nothing that survives. For every royal tomb with golden words, there are thousands of lives whose names have disappeared. A child buried with beads, a worker laid in a simple grave, a woman whose hands show the strain of labour, a man whose skull bears an old healed wound. They lived. They were known. They spoke and laughed and feared and slept under stars. But their names did not reach us. Did ancient belief leave room for them? The answer is not simple. In many societies, ritual action mattered even when writing was absent. Memory could be held in family practice, oral naming, seasonal offerings, and the continued presence of the grave. But from the distance of history, those invisible forms are hard to recover. Scholars can describe burial customs and compare texts, but the private hope attached to an unnamed grave remains beyond full reach. At the first gate, this uncertainty becomes personal. You feel how vulnerable identity is. A person may build, love, suffer, and serve. But if no one preserves the name, history slowly closes over them like silt. Perhaps this is why ancient people carved names in stone, painted them in tombs, pressed them into clay, and repeated them in prayer. They were not only seeking fame, they were resisting erasure. You raise your hand toward the gate, but do not touch it yet. A warmth moves through the air, as if someone has spoken from far behind you. Not loudly, not clearly, only the suggestion of a voice. It might be a parent calling a child. It might be a mourner whispering over a grave. It might be your own memory trying to hold itself together. The first gate teaches that the journey of the soul begins with a fragile miracle. You are someone. You have been called by a name. You have left marks in other lives, even if no museum ever keeps them. Ancient texts may give special power to written names, but the deeper human fear is older than writing. To die is frightening. To be forgotten may be another kind of death. Still, the gate does not close. It seems to listen for more than formal identity. It listens for the shape of a life as held by memory, by breath, by ritual, by those who remain awake for a little while after the lamps are lowered. It may be that the first passage is not earned by rank, wealth, or carved stone, but by being remembered in the wide, trembling archive of human grief. You step forward. The marks on the gate brighten once, faint as moonlight on wet clay. The air thins. The scent of incense fades. Somewhere beyond the threshold, another sound begins, like water being poured into a shallow bowl, and as the first gate opens, you feel that something has been left behind already. Not the whole self, not yet. Only the need to be seen by the living world. The sound of water grows clearer, though no river is visible. It comes from somewhere ahead, hidden behind a pale curtain of mist. You walk toward it through a passage that feels lower than the sky and higher than the earth, a place made of dim stone, faint breath, and a silence so soft it almost seems woven. The floor under your feet is smooth now, worn by travellers who may never have had bodies. The air smells of wet clay, crushed herbs, and a thin thread of smoke that curls from unseen bowls. The second gate waits in vapour. It is not dark like the first. It shines faintly, not with gold, but with the muted brightness of water under the moon. You hear drops falling into a basin. You hear a slow pouring, as though careful hands are washing something too delicate to touch directly. The gate seems less like a door than a veil of purification, a boundary the soul cannot cross while still carrying the full dust of earthly life. In ancient ritual, water was rarely only water. It cleaned the skin, but it also marked transition. It separated ordinary time from sacred time. Priests washed before entering holy spaces, bodies were washed before burial, hands were rinsed before offerings. Temples in Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Levant, Greece, and many other worlds used washing, sprinkling, bathing, or libation as part of the movement from impurity toward order. You pause before the mist and feel it gather on your face. The water is cold, but not cruel. It does not accuse. It simply reveals how much of life clings to a person. Dust from roads, smoke from houses, oil from labour, tears, blood, food, desire, fear. Every human life leaves a residue, and ancient people knew this physically. They lived close to soil, animals, sweat, childbirth, sickness, death, and decay. Cleanliness was not only comfort. In ritual thought, it could become a language for returning the world to balance. In Egypt, purification had a deep connection to temple practice and funerary hope. The dead could be washed, anointed, wrapped, and supplied with protective spells. Natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture, was used in mummification to dry and preserve the body when full embalming was practiced. Oils and resins gave fragrance and sacred care. The process was not simply medical or practical. It helped transform the deceased from a vulnerable body into a being prepared for continued existence. Yet there is always debate around how to understand these actions. Were they meant to preserve the body for the soul's return, to imitate divine myths, to display status, to maintain social order, or to create a ritual transformation that made the dead safe and powerful? Scholars often see several meanings at once, and the balance may have changed across periods. Ancient practice is rarely one thing only. The mist thickens. You remember that in Mesopotamian tradition, water offerings for the dead were important. The dead could be imagined as needing drink, and the living poured libations into graves, pipes, or offering places. In some texts, lack of proper burial or offerings could leave the dead troubled. Water, then, was not only cleansing, it was nourishment across a boundary. A simple pour from a cup could become a gesture of mercy towards someone who no longer had hands. The second gate seems to gather both meanings. It cleanses and it feeds. It removes and it restores. You step closer, and the mist parts just enough for you to see shapes along the sides of the passage. Stone bowls stand in shallow niches. Some hold clear water, others hold ash, others hold salt, oil, or powdered green herbs. Their surfaces are still, but each seems to hold an old human belief. The soul cannot rise while tangled in everything it has touched. The soul must be prepared. A curious fringe idea often appears in discussions of ancient purification. Some interpreters have wondered whether rites of washing, anointing, and passing through smoke preserved memories of initiation chambers where living participants symbolically died and were reborn. In this view, funerary purification might have mirrored secret rituals for priests, kings, or temple servants. The evidence is uneven. and it would be unwise to imagine a single hidden school behind every ancient rite. But the overlap between death ritual and initiation is real enough to make the thought linger. To be purified is often to become someone else. You reach toward one of the bowls. The water in it reflects no face. Instead, it reflects movement. A child running through dust, a woman grinding grain, a man lifting brick, a priest shaving his head before service, a mourner washing a body with trembling care. None of the images lasts. They pass like ripples. The second gate does not erase life, but it loosens life's grip. Perhaps this is why purification could be both comforting and frightening. To be cleansed is to lose what clings to you. But what if some of what clings to you is what you call yourself? Your sorrows, your grudges, your familiar hungers, the warmth of certain rooms, the smell of your own house at evening, the way your name sounded in one beloved voice. If these are washed away too quickly, would the soul feel free or lonely? Ancient texts do not always answer with gentleness. Some afterlife journeys include dangers, punishments, demons, or trials. Others offer fields, feasts, light, and divine presence. The road is not the same in every tradition, even within Egypt. The afterlife could be imagined through the solar journey, the realm of Osiris, fertile fields, judgment scenes, gates, caverns, and cosmic renewal. These images overlap, but they do not form one simple diagram. They are more like many lamps placed in a dark house. The second gate glows brighter. You notice that the mist rises from 7 small channels cut into the stone floor. They cross and braid before disappearing beneath the threshold. This detail may belong more to dream than to archaeology, yet it feels shaped by ancient habits of thought. 7 often appears as a number of completeness, ritual sequence, divine order, or cosmic layering. In some Mesopotamian traditions, repeated actions performed 7 times could carry ritual force. In later cosmologies, 7 heavens or 7 planetary spheres could structure ascent. Number becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes meaning. The channels whisper under the stone. You understand that the soul's cleansing is not a single act. It is a slow reduction of noise. Dust is rinsed away. Smoke passes over the invisible body. Salt bites gently at old wounds. Oil softens what fear has hardened. Words once spoken in anger lose their sharpness. Pleasures once clutched become warm, then distant. The soul is not punished here. It is made light enough to continue. Still, something uncertain remains. If purification removes impurity, who defines impurity? The priest, the god, the community, the text, the mourner, the soul itself? Ancient societies connected purity to birth, death, blood, food, sex, disease, class, temple access, and cosmic order in ways that do not always match modern moral categories. A person could be ritually impure without being evil. A person could be socially honoured and still need cleansing before sacred contact. The old categories are subtle and sometimes uncomfortable. You let the mist settle over you. For a moment, the passage becomes almost weightless. The scent of herbs deepens, then fades. The cold water touches your hands, your brow, your chest, though no hand pours it. Behind you, the dust of the first road loosens. Ahead, the gate brightens into a thin line, and as the second gate opens, you feel that the journey has taken another small thing from you. Not your name. That remains, faint but present. This time, it takes the dirt of belonging to one place, one body, one day. You're not clean because you were never stained. You're clean because the old world has begun, gently, to let go. The mist falls behind you, and the passage opens into a chamber of listening. At first, it seems empty. There are no walls close enough to touch, no ceiling low enough to see. Only a wide grey space filled with the hush that comes before dawn. The ground beneath you has changed again. It is no longer smooth with water. It is covered in a fine pale dust, soft as ash, and every step leaves a print that remains for a moment, then slowly fills itself in. You do not hear a voice, but you feel that you are not alone. The third gate stands far ahead, made of dark wood bound with bands of dull metal. It does not shine. It does not breathe mist. It waits like the door of an ancient court. On either side of it, shapes gather slowly out of the dim air. Some are almost human, some are taller, some are only suggestions of wings, robes, animal heads, eyes, staffs, tablets, or stars. They do not move toward you. They do not threaten. They witness. In many ancient traditions, the dead were not imagined as entering the next world unseen. They were observed, questioned, weighed, recorded, escorted, accused, protected, or judged. The afterlife was often social, even when it was terrifyingly strange. There were beings there already, gods, spirits, ancestors, demons, scribes, gatekeepers, messengers, and divine attendants filled the unseen architecture. This is one of the most persistent ideas in the old records. The soul does not disappear into silence. It appears before watchers. You stand still, and the chamber seems to adjust around your breathing. In Egypt, one of the most famous afterlife images shows the weighing of the heart. The heart of the deceased is placed on a scale against the feather of Mayat, the principle of truth, order, balance, and rightness. The god Anubis tends the scale. Thoth, associated with writing and knowledge, records the result. Osiris presides in the deeper court. A waiting monster, often called Amit, represents the terrible consequence of failure. This image is widely known now, reproduced in books, museums, documentaries, and classrooms. But in its original setting, it was not merely decoration. It belonged to a world where moral truth and cosmic order could meet in ritual image. And yet, even this familiar scene is not simple. Scholars continue to debate how ordinary Egyptians understood the judgment of the dead, how the negative confession functioned, and whether the scene should be read as a moral trial, a ritual guarantee, a theological drama, or a mixture of all three. The dead person often speaks declarations of innocence, saying they have not committed certain wrongs. But the text can feel both ethical and ritual, personal and formulaic. It is a court, but also a spell. The third gate listens to that uncertainty. You feel the presence of witnesses around you, and you understand that they are not all judges. Some may be ancestors, some may be scribes, some may be guardians assigned to the road, some may be the remembered dead who travelled first. In Mesopotamian thought, the underworld could have officials, rulers, and divine beings. The dead might join a great community beneath the earth, shadowed and ordered, not simply vanish into loneliness. Even gods who entered that realm encountered its rules. The ancient imagination often made the unseen world bureaucratic because the visible world was bureaucratic. Temples kept records, palaces received reports, scribes wrote accounts, courts heard disputes, witnesses mattered in contracts, property transfers, marriages, adoptions, loans, and legal cases. To be seen by witnesses was to become part of an acknowledged reality. Without witnesses, a claim could fade. Without testimony, truth could be difficult to hold. It is possible that the third gate reflects that old social habit. The soul arrives, and the universe asks for testimony. Not only from the soul, from life itself. The air thickens, shapes become clearer. One figure holds a tablet against the chest, another carries a cord, as if for measuring. Another holds a lamp whose flame gives no heat. Farther away, you glimpse faces that might belong to the dead, though they are not frightening. They are solemn, patient, and faintly familiar in a way that does not depend on memory. Perhaps every ancestor looks a little like someone you have loved, A curious fringe possibility appears here, quietly. Some modern readers have wondered whether ancient witness scenes were not only about death, but about memory fields, invisible records, or a kind of cosmic archive in which every action leaves a mark. Later religious traditions developed ideas of books in heaven, recording angels, divine judgment, and the remembrance of deeds. It would be too much to force all of these into one ancient source, but the recurring pattern is compelling. Human beings have long sensed that action should not dissolve completely. Someone, somewhere, should know. The third gate does not say whether the hope is true, it only makes you feel the question. If your life were witnessed fully, what would remain hidden? Not only your public actions, not only what others praised or blamed, the unseen motives, the kindness you never mentioned, the envy you swallowed, the harm you excused, the forgiveness you delayed, the small mercies no one thanked you for. The ancient idea of divine witnesses may be unsettling because it answers a human fear and creates another. We want our goodness seen. We fear our shadow seen with equal clarity. You move forward a few steps, and the dust beneath your feet rises in small clouds. At the edge of the chamber, a line of low stone seats appears. They remind you of both a council and a tomb. In ancient cities, elders could sit at gates to hear disputes. The city gate was often a place of law, transaction, judgment, and public recognition. This detail matters because gates were not only architectural openings, they were civic spaces. They were places where truth was spoken in front of others, where decisions became visible, so the third celestial gate may carry the memory of the city gate. The soul arrives at the boundary, and the witnesses gather, but a scholarly uncertainty remains. How much of this is shared human symbolism, and how much reflects direct cultural transmission between ancient civilizations? Did gate judgments spread through contact, trade, conquest, and translation? Or did many cultures independently imagine thresholds as places of scrutiny because human life itself teaches that doors are guarded? The answer is likely mixed, but the evidence is uneven. Texts travel. Images travel. Fear travels too. Though no caravan is needed, the witnesses remain silent. You expect them to ask your name, but that has already been carried through. You expect them to wash you again, but the scent of herbs is gone. Here, the soul is not named or cleansed. It is seen. Every threshold changes the traveller in a different way. A figure with a tablet lifts its head. The motion is small, almost gentle. The tablet is blank from where you stand, yet somehow you know it is not empty. Perhaps it contains words. Perhaps it contains no writing at all, only the impression of a life as it truly was. The thought is more intimate than frightening. Ancient people may have clothed this moment in gods and courtrooms, but beneath the imagery lies a simple hope. Nothing meaningful is lost. The third gate opens without sound. Beyond it, you see not a corridor, but a deep field of darkness pierced by small lights. Stars, perhaps, or lamps, or eyes too distant to name. The witnesses do not follow, but their attention remains on your back as you cross. It is not heavy anymore. It is strangely steadying, and as you pass through the third gate, you feel another burden loosen. Not memory, not identity, not the traces of earth. This time, what falls away is the belief that you were ever entirely unseen. The darkness ahead is not empty. It is wide, cool, and filled with small lights that do not flicker like oil lamps. They hang in the distance with a patience older than cities. As you walk, the ground beneath you becomes harder, almost polished, like dark stone that has held night for many ages. The air smells faintly of cedar smoke and cold dust. There is no wind, yet you feel movement above you, slow and circular, as if the ceiling of the world is turning. The fourth gate rises beneath the stars. It is higher than the others, though not more threatening. Its frame is dark blue, almost black, and set with points of pale light that seem to shift when you do not look directly at them. Around the arch are carved signs of moons, discs, animals, boats, and long lines of dots like patient records of the sky. This gate does not ask who you are. It does not wash you or summon witnesses. It asks whether you understand order. For ancient people, the sky was not decoration. It was a calendar, a clock, a field of divine signs, and a vast memory above the earth. Farmers watched the seasons, sailors and travellers watched directions, priests watched omens, kings watched eclipses. The rising and setting of stars could mark festivals, agricultural cycles, river changes, and sacred time. Long before modern astronomy, the night sky was studied with devotion, fear, and extraordinary patience. You stand beneath that ancient attention now. In Mesopotamia, scholars and priests observed the heavens carefully. They recorded lunar phases, planetary movements, eclipses, and celestial omens on clay tablets. Later, Babylonian astronomy became remarkably sophisticated, using long records and mathematical methods to predict patterns in the sky. These observations were not always separated from religion, because the heavens were understood as a realm of divine communication. A strange star, a darkened moon, or a wandering planet might carry meaning for king, temple, city, or land. The fourth gate glimmers as if it has been listening to every observation. You imagine a priest on a flat roof at night, wrapped in a wool cloak against the cold, staring upward while the city sleeps below. Around him, the mud brick walls hold the day's heat. Somewhere in the distance, a dog calls, a lamp burns near a tablet. He watches the moon move through its phases and notes the behaviour of planets that seem to wander against the fixed stars. To him, the sky is not remote, it is a written surface, and the gods write slowly. Egypt can, too, place the dead in relation to the heavens. Pyramid texts, among the oldest religious writings from ancient Egypt, speak of royal ascent to the sky, an association with imperishable stars. Tomb ceilings later displayed astronomical imagery, star fields, deacons, constellations, and divine figures connected to cosmic order. The sun's nightly journey through the underworld and rebirth at dawn became one of the great images of renewal. For those who could enter that symbolic pattern, death was not only descent, it could become participation in cosmic rhythm. But uncertainty remains. Scholars still debate how different groups understood celestial imagery, especially across long periods of Egyptian history. Some texts were royal, some were later adapted for non-royal use. Some images may be astronomical, mythological, ritual, political, or all at once. A star on a tomb ceiling may be a star, a soul, a goddess, a direction, a promise, or a carefully layered symbol. Ancient art often refuses to stay in only one category. The fourth gate is shaped by that refusal. Its lights do not form a single constellation. They rearrange themselves as you approach. For a moment, you see a bull, then a boat, then a ladder, then a seated figure holding a measuring cord, then nothing but scattered points. You realize the gate is not giving you one map. It is reminding you that the sky has always been read through culture, fear, memory, mathematics, and longing. A curious fringe tidbit stirs in the cold air. Some interpreters have wondered whether the idea of ascending through 7 heavenly gates reflects the ancient visibility of 7 wandering celestial powers: the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. In later philosophical and mystical systems, the soul sometimes travels through planetary spheres, shedding influences or returning through cosmic layers. It would be careless to project this full structure back into every early tradition, but the link between 7, the heavens, and the visible planets became powerful in the ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern imagination. You lift your eyes, and the gate seems to deepen. If the first gate belonged to name, the second to purification, and the third to witness, this one belongs to alignment, not obedience in a harsh sense, but attunement. The soul must pass from the confusion of human time into a wider rhythm. Days, months, years, rains, harvests, floods, festivals, births, deaths, and stars all move in patterns. Some are predictable. Some break the pattern and frighten the world. Ancient sky watching was born from both trust and anxiety. You feel that anxiety in the silence between the lights. An eclipse could be beautiful, but also alarming. A comet could inspire awe and dread. A planet appearing in a certain region of the sky might be read as a sign. Modern science explains celestial motion through gravity, orbital mechanics, light and distance. Yet the emotional force of the ancient sky remains understandable. When the moon darkens, even now, something in the body notices. When stars spread over a desert, the mind becomes quiet. When dawn returns, relief feels older than language. The fourth gate opens only a little. Through the narrow space, you see what looks like a stairway made of dim blue stone. It rises, but not steeply. Along its edges burn small lamps, each like a captured star. The steps are uneven, and on every seventh step there is a mark worn smooth by touch. Perhaps pilgrims touch such marks in life. Perhaps priests counted recitations. Perhaps the image is only a dream shaped by number and sky. Still, the rhythm matters. 7 steps, 7 stars, 7 gates, 7 turns of a ritual phrase. 7 was not always used in the same way, but it often carried a sense of fullness or sacred sequence. In Mesopotamian incantations, repeated actions could strengthen ritual effect. In biblical and later religious traditions, 7 often marked completion, holiness, or cosmic order. In mystical traditions, 7 heavens could become stages of ascent. The number gathers meanings like dust gathers on a traveller's robe. You place 1 foot on the first visible step, but you do not climb yet. Instead, you look back through the open chamber. The witnesses are gone. The mist is gone. The first dark gate is far beyond memory. Around you, only the heavens remain. You understand why ancient people might have imagined the soul travelling upward. Not because they knew the sky in a modern scientific way, but because the sky appeared ordered, unreachable, luminous, and alive with patterns that outlasted human breath. What else could be closer to eternity? And yet, another debate stays unresolved. Were ancient heavenly journeys meant to describe actual cosmic geography, visionary experience, priestly ritual, poetic theology, or moral transformation? Different texts suggest different answers. A royal soul rising to the stars is not the same as a visionary travelling through angelic palaces. A funerary spell is not the same as an astronomical diary. But all of them reveal a world where the visible heavens and invisible destiny lean toward one another. The fourth gate opens wider. Cold starlight spills across the floor. It touches your hands, not like water, but like distance. You feel smaller, but not diminished. You feel measured, but not judged. You feel the deep calm of entering a rhythm that did not begin with you, and will not end when your name is no longer spoken. As you cross the threshold, the lights above seem to turn once, slowly, like a great wheel moving without sound. Something loosens inside you. Not your memory, not your cleansing, not the knowledge of being witnessed. This time, what falls away is the illusion that your life moved alone. The stars have been moving with you all along. The star path grows quieter. At first, you think the silence is only distance, the natural hush of a place far from riverbanks, hearths, city gates, and human rooms. But as you continue, you realize the silence is doing something more intimate. It is not merely surrounding you, It is entering you. It settles between thoughts. It softens the edges of familiar images. It makes the names of places feel less sharp, as if memory itself has begun to breathe more slowly. The fifth gate waits in a pale valley of darkness. There is no mist here, no court of witnesses, no shining constellation carved above an arch. The gate is almost plain. It stands alone, made from a stone that looks like cooled ash. Its surface is smooth, without inscription. No symbols mark it. No guardian appears beside it. If the first gate asks for your name, this one seems to ask what remains when a name no longer holds everything together. The air is cool and dry. It smells faintly of old linen, extinguished wax, and desert stone after midnight. The ground under your feet is soft, but not dusty. It has the texture of worn cloth. Each step gives slightly, then settles again, leaving no print at all. Here the soul begins to meet forgetting. Ancient cultures did not always treat forgetting as simple loss. Sometimes forgetting was feared, because the dead depended on remembrance, offerings, names, and ritual continuity. Sometimes forgetting was imagined as necessary, because the soul had to leave behind the pain, appetite, anger, and confusion of mortal life. The old records do not give one answer. They preserve attention. To be remembered is to survive. To forget is to be released. You feel that tension as you approach the fifth gate. In Greek tradition, later myths speak of the river Lethe, whose waters brought forgetfulness to the dead. Souls might drink and lose memory of their former lives, especially in ideas connected with rebirth. Another river, Mnemosyne, memory, appears in certain mystery traditions, where the initiated soul is instructed to seek memory rather than forgetfulness. These ideas are not the same as Egyptian or Mesopotamian funerary beliefs, but they reveal a deep ancient concern. After death, should the soul remember everything or be freed from remembering? The question has no easy answer. You imagine a person carrying every grief beyond the grave, every embarrassment, every longing, every unfinished apology, every room they can no longer enter, every hand they cannot touch. To remember everything forever might be unbearable, but to forget everything would be another kind of disappearance. The fifth gate stands between these fears, quiet as a sleeping face. There is a mainstream historical detail hidden in the very silence of this threshold. Many ancient funerary practices tried to preserve identity, not erase it. Egyptians preserved names, bodies, images, titles, and family relations. Mesopotamian families offered food and water to remember dead. Roman households later kept ancestral images and honoured family spirits. Memory tied the dead to the living and gave social shape to afterlife hope. The human being did not become abstract immediately. They remained someone's parent, child, spouse, servant, king, neighbour, or ancestor. Yet alongside this preservation, many traditions also understood death as transformation. The dead became something other than the living. They could become blessed, shadowed, ancestral, divine, dangerous, purified, judged, reborn, or absorbed into a larger order. Transformation requires loss. A seed cannot remain a seed and become a plant. A name cannot remain only a household sound and become a star. You pause before the gate and notice that its surface reflects nothing. Not your face, not your movement, not the lights behind you. It is a mirror that refuses to show. A curious fringe idea whispers from the edge of later mystical traditions. Some interpreters have wondered whether the gates of ascent were designed as stages of unmaking, where the soul gradually surrendered layers of identity until only a more essential self remained. In this view, the 7 gates are not merely locations, but psychological thresholds. Name, body, testimony, cosmic order, memory, desire, and separateness might all be released one by one. This is not a proven ancient system across all cultures, and scholars would rightly be cautious. but as an interpretive lens, it helps explain why gates are so often linked with loss, as well as passage. The fifth gate remains closed. You wait. What comes to you first is a smell. Bread baking in an oven of packed clay. Then the feel of a reed mat beneath tired knees. Then the sound of someone laughing in another room. The memories appear without warning, not as complete scenes, but as fragments of earthly attachment. A courtyard at dusk, a cup of watered beer, a child's small hand gripping two fingers, a mother bending over a lamp, a father's silence, a market full of flies, spices, wool, onions, sweat, and bargaining voices. Human life returns through small things, never through grand monuments first. The gate does not take them all at once. It lets them pass through you like wind through reeds. In ancient literature, the dead often long for contact with the living, or the living fear the hunger of the dead. Ghost stories, necromantic episodes, ancestor rites, and funerary laments all reveal a world where memory could be active and emotional. The boundary was not sealed in a modern psychological sense. The dead could be mourned, invoked, fed, questioned, feared, or comforted. In some Mesopotamian texts, the condition of the dead depends in part on burial and descendants. In many later traditions, prayers and offerings continue to matter, but how literally these beliefs were held, and how they differed between formal religion and everyday feeling, remains difficult to know. A lament may be poetry, a ritual may be obligation, a ghost story may be warning, entertainment, theology, or social memory. The ancient sources do not always tell you where belief ends and image begins. Perhaps ancient people themselves did not separate them sharply. You step closer, and the plain gate begins to show faint marks after all. They are not letters. They are impressions, like places where hands have touched stone for many generations. You place your palm against one of them. It is cold, then warm. For an instant, you feel the presence of countless travellers who also paused here, reluctant to release some beloved piece of earthly life. Their fear is not dramatic, it is tender. They do not want to forget the sound of rain on a roof. They do not want to forget the weight of a sleeping child. They do not want to forget the face that waited at the doorway. The gate seems to understand, perhaps forgetting, at this threshold, does not mean destruction. Perhaps it means loosening the pain attached to memory. The image remains, but the wound softens. The name remains, but the desperate grip opens. The love remains, but no longer burns like thirst. It may be that ancient ideas of forgetting were never only about erasure. They may also have been about mercy. The fifth gate opens inward, slowly, revealing a passage lined with pale lamps. Their flames are low and blue, giving almost no heat. As you cross, you notice that the memories do not vanish behind you. They become quieter. They no longer pull at your robe. They no longer ask you to turn back. And as you enter the next passage, something delicate falls away. Not love, not identity, not the truth of what was lived. This time, what leaves you is the ache that made memory feel like a chain. The past is still there, but it has become light enough to carry. The blue lamps fade behind you, and warmth begins to gather in the passage ahead. At first, it is only a change in the air, a soft pressure against your skin, like standing near a sealed oven before dawn. Then the scent arrives, not the comforting smoke of a household hearth, not the sweet curl of incense, but something sharper, sun-baked stone, resin, charcoal, metal warmed until it gives off a faint bitter breath. The corridor brightens by degrees, and every step seems to draw you closer to a light that has been waiting longer than memory. The sixth gate is made of fire, but it does not burn wildly. It stands within a ring of golden darkness, shaped like an arch of flame held perfectly still. No sparks leap from it, no roar fills the chamber. The fire is controlled, solemn, almost priestly. It moves without consuming the stone around it. Its colours shift from amber to white to deep red, like the last edge of the sun touching desert dust. You stop before it and feel the heat on your face. Fire has always been one of the most double-edged symbols in human history. It cooks food, hardens clay, fires bricks, clears land, warms bodies, frightens animals, lights temples, and destroys cities. It is household life and catastrophe in the same element. Ancient people knew this with their hands, not only their minds. They carried embers carefully. They watched lamps at night. They feared lightning, drought, burning roofs, and armies that brought flame to gates and fields. So when the soul reaches fire, it reaches something more dangerous than punishment alone. In many traditions, fire can purify. It can separate what is precious from what is useless. As metal is refined in a furnace, it can transform offerings into smoke that rises toward the divine. It can mark sacrifice, holiness, danger, warning, and renewal. In Zoroastrian tradition, sacred fire held a central place as a symbol connected with purity, truth, and divine presence. Though it was not worshipped as a god in the simple way outsiders sometimes imagine. In Greek, Roman, Vedic, Iranian, and many other ritual worlds, flame could be a bridge between human action and unseen powers. The sixth gate glows brighter, and the heat becomes strangely intimate. It does not feel like the heat of summer. It feels like being seen through. The first gates asked for name, cleansing, witness, alignment, and release. This gate asks what in you can endure brightness, not the cool light of stars, but the fierce light that leaves no shadow undisturbed. In Egyptian religion, the sun's nightly journey through the underworld became one of the great patterns of death and renewal. The sun god travelled through dangerous hours of darkness, meeting beings, gates, caverns, enemies, and protective powers, before rising again in the morning. Tomb texts and underworld books describe this journey in complex images. The dead hope to join, accompany, or be renewed through the solar cycle. Night was not the end of light. It was the hidden road by which light became possible again. Yet scholars still debate how these solar texts functioned in practice. Some were placed in royal tombs. Some appeared later in different settings. Some may have been ritual guides, theological diagrams, symbolic dramas, or sacred images of cosmic maintenance. Their meaning was not simply that the sun went down and came up. It was that order survived darkness through repeated divine action. You feel that idea in the fire before you. The flame is not random. It has a path. It rises in layers, like a curtain being drawn upward by invisible hands. Inside it, for a moment, you see shapes. A solar boat passing through night, a phoenix-like bird glowing above a mound, a bronze mirror flashing in temple light, a body wrapped in linen surrounded by lamps, a blackened field after burning, where new green shoots will later appear. The images vanish quickly. A curious fringe possibility gathers near the edge of the chamber. Some have wondered whether fiery gates in afterlife and ascent traditions may preserve echoes of ancient initiations involving controlled heat, darkness, light, and sensory deprivation. A candidate for priesthood, kingship, or mystery practice might pass through stage spaces that mimicked death, judgment, purification, and rebirth. The evidence varies widely and cannot be used to explain every fire symbol. Still, it is possible that some descriptions of cosmic passage were shaped not only by belief about the dead, but by experiences of the living in ritual chambers lit by flame. You look at the gate again and imagine a temple at night. The outer court is cold. The inner room is warm with lamps. Oil burns in shallow bowls. Resin smoke gathers under the ceiling. A priest speaks words that are half instruction and half memory. The initiate, or the mourner, or the king, stands in a carefully controlled darkness, then sees sudden light. In the body, Such an experience would feel enormous. It could be remembered as a gate. The flame before you bends inward. It is not waiting for an offering of meat, grain, incense, or oil. It is waiting for something subtler. Anger, perhaps. Pride, shame. Fear that survived even cleansing and witness. The ache of memory has loosened, but there are other things people carry. Old defences, hardened stories about themselves, the need to be right, the need to be innocent, the hidden wish that certain enemies should suffer forever. Fire does not negotiate with these things, it simply shows them their own shape. You feel the heat enter the space around your chest. It is not pain, but it is not comfort either. Ancient images of divine brightness often carry this tension. To approach the holy is not always pleasant. It may heal, but it may also expose. In many traditions, gods, angels, solar beings, or radiant realms are described with both beauty and danger. Human eyes cannot always endure sacred light. Human motives cannot always endure sacred truth. Still, the gate does not condemn. It waits until what is heavy begins to smoke. The open scholarly uncertainty here is deep and difficult. When ancient texts describe punishment, purification, or fiery transformation after death, how should they be read? Are they moral warnings for the living, ritual tools for the dead, symbolic descriptions of inner change, theological claims about divine justice, or poetic images of cosmic danger? The answer depends on the text, the culture, the period, and the audience. Some images were meant to frighten, some were meant to protect, some were meant to explain why justice matters in a world where many wrongs go unanswered. You watch the flame without looking away. In its brightness, you see not a courtroom, but a furnace, not a place of cruelty, but a place where mixture is separated, ore from metal, smoke from resin, ash from wood, light from darkness. The ancient world understood transformation through materials. Clay becomes brick in heat. Bread becomes food in heat. Metal becomes tool in heat. A corpse becomes ash in traditions of cremation. A sacrifice becomes smoke. Fire changes the state of things. Perhaps the soul, too, had to change state. The sixth gate opens in a way unlike the others. It does not swing aside. It narrows, forming a path through its own centre. The flames lean away just enough to let you pass. The heat surrounds you, and for a moment every remaining attachment in you brightens like a thread held near a lamp. Some threads burn away, some glow and remain. Love remains, truth remains, the small kindnesses remain. But the bitterness around them darkens, curls, and falls into ash. You step through slowly. On the other side, the air is cooler and the silence feels newly washed. You look back, but the fire has already become a thin golden line in the distance. No smoke follows you. No wound remains. Only a faint warmth in the centre of your being, like an ember protected in a covered bowl. And as the sixth gate closes, you understand that the journey has taken something sharper than dust, fear, or grief. It has taken the parts of you that could not pass through brightness without changing. What remains is not perfect. It is only clearer. Beyond the fire, the road becomes almost weightless. There is no corridor now, no carved wall, no lamp line, no scent of resin or river mud. You walk through a dim openness that seems to have forgotten direction. Above you, below you, and around you, the same deep quiet stretches without edge. It is not empty in a frightening way. It is empty in the way a bowl is empty before water is poured into it. Waiting, receptive, still. The seventh gate appears only when you stop looking for it. At first, it is a faint outline in the distance, pale as breath on polished stone. Then it grows clearer, not by moving closer, but by allowing itself to be noticed. It is smaller than expected. No tower rises above it. No guardian stands beside it. No stars burn across its surface. No flame frames its threshold. It is a simple opening shaped from a material you cannot name, somewhere between moonlight, bone, and silence. You feel no fear as you approach. That is what unsettles you. The other gates are something of the soul: name, cleansing, witness, alignment, release, transformation. Each one had a texture, a lesson, a pressure. This gate asks nothing in any way you can recognize. It does not question, purify, measure, or burn. It waits with such complete stillness that you begin to wonder whether the final threshold is not a test at all, but the end of testing. Ancient traditions often become quiet at the highest point. They may describe roads, gods, dangers, gates, rivers, courts, stars, and punishments in vivid detail. Yet when they approach the ultimate divine presence, language can thin. The highest heaven, the innermost sanctuary, the most hidden chamber, the place beyond ordinary sight, is often described through restraint. Sometimes no image is adequate. Sometimes the sacred must be approached through absence. You stand before the seventh gate and you understand why. In Mesopotamian temples, sacred space was arranged through degrees of access. Outer areas could be busy with people, offerings, animals, officials, and ritual movement. Inner rooms were more restricted. The cult statue of the deity, when present, occupied a special chamber where divine presence was honoured through daily care, food, clothing, music, and ceremony. Not everyone could enter. Holiness was not only a feeling, it was arranged through space. In Egypt, too, temple architecture moved from brightness toward darkness, from open courts toward enclosed sanctuaries. As one went deeper, ceilings lowered, light narrowed, and access became increasingly limited. The most sacred place was often not grand in a modern theatrical sense. It could be small, dark, and intensely charged. The divine was approached by narrowing the world. The seventh gate seems to carry that ancient architectural memory. After vast stars and living fire, it offers smallness. After cosmic movement, it offers a still room. Perhaps this is because the highest threshold is not reached by expansion, but by quieting. A scholarly uncertainty rests here like dust on stone. When ancient texts describe the final place of divine nearness, should we imagine a literal heaven, a symbolic temple, a ritualized mental state, a royal ideology, or a poetic answer to mortality? Different cultures give different clues. Some texts are meant for kings, some for priests, some for the dead, some for visionaries. Some may have been recited, some painted, some performed, some contemplated. The final gate changes depending on the tradition holding it. You reach the threshold and notice that there are no inscriptions on it. This absence feels important. The first gate was marked by names, the third by records, the fourth by celestial signs. Even the fifth carried impressions of touch, but the seventh gate refuses writing. It stands beyond the scribal urge to list and classify. Ancient people loved lists because lists created order. They listed gods, offerings, kings, stars, cities, omens, sins, virtues, and ritual words. Yet the final mystery may have been the one thing no list could hold. Some have wondered whether the silence around the highest gate hints at an older, more hidden teaching, one not preserved because it was never meant to be written. This idea has attracted many speculative interpretations, some careful and some not. It is possible that certain priestly or initiatory knowledge remained oral, guarded, or restricted. Ancient temples certainly had specialized knowledge, and not every rite was public. But it is also possible that the silence is not secrecy. It may simply be the natural limit of language before death and divinity. The gate remains open, though you have not touched it. Beyond it, you see no paradise in the ordinary sense, no golden city, no field of endless grain, no ancestors waving from a bright shore. Instead, there is a room, or something like a room, filled with soft grey light, At its centre is a stone seat with no figure upon it. Around the seat, the air seems folded, as if presence has just stepped away, or has never needed a visible form. The empty seat disturbs you more gently than any monster could. Ancient religious art often shows gods in forms humans can recognize: seated, crowned, winged, animal-headed, radiant, enthroned, or holding symbols of power. But divine absence also mattered: an empty throne, a sacred stone, a hidden statue, a sealed chamber, a name too holy to speak, a god represented by symbols rather than direct portrait. The unseen can be more powerful than the seen because the imagination cannot finish it. You step just inside the gate. The stillness deepens. The sound of your own movement disappears. You do not lose your name, but it no longer needs to be spoken. You do not lose your memories, but they no longer arrive in scenes. You do not lose your life, but it no longer feels like a line from birth to death. Everything becomes quieter and more spacious, as if the soul has reached a place where it is not asked to explain itself. And then comes the strangest possibility. Perhaps the seventh gate does not lead to a place at all. Perhaps it marks the point where place stops being the right idea. Ancient maps of the soul may use roads, doors, ladders, rivers, and courts because human minds need shapes to approach the shapeless. The journey may be real in symbol, even if not geographical in a simple sense. Or it may be that ancient people believed both things at once, that symbol and reality were not enemies, but two sides of sacred speech. You look back, though there's almost nothing behind you now. The road of gates has become thin, like a dream remembered at dawn. Water, witnesses, stars, fire, names, grief, and dust all remain somewhere in the soul, but softened beyond burden. The seventh gate has not erased them. It has made them quiet enough to rest. No final answer is given. The ancient records never fully agree. The clay tablet breaks, the papyrus phrase, the tomb wall darkens, the translation leaves a question in the margin, the museum label gives a date, a dynasty, a material, a region, but it cannot say what the dead person felt when loved ones spoke the last words. It cannot say whether the soul saw a gate, a field, a star, a judge, a flame, or only a silence so complete it felt like home. You stand beside the empty seat and listen. Nothing speaks, yet the silence is not vacant. It is full of everything that cannot be carried in language. Perhaps this is why the final gate is stillness. Not because the journey ends with nothing, but because whatever waits beyond the last threshold cannot be approached by noise. And as you remain there, neither entering farther nor turning back, you feel the seventh gate close without closing. It becomes part of the stillness itself. You're not trapped. You're not released. You're simply held at the edge of what ancient people tried, again and again, to imagine. The last threshold does not answer. It receives. The stillness does not vanish, but it begins to gather shapes. You notice them slowly, as if your eyes have been closed for a long time and are only now learning how to receive a world without daylight. The empty seat fades into a dim distance. The final gate is no longer directly before you, yet its silence remains inside the air. Around you, along the edges of a wide passage, figures begin to appear. They do not step forward. They have been waiting all along. Some stand with human bodies and animal faces. Some are only shadows with bright eyes. Some have wings folded close against their backs. Some hold knives, staffs, ropes, lamps, tablets, keys, or bowls. Some seem carved from the same stone as temple walls. Some look almost like smoke given the memory of a body. You cannot tell whether they are frightening because they are dangerous or because they are sacred, and the ancient mind often gave those two feelings the same shape. These are the guardians without faces, or with too many faces to name. Ancient afterlife traditions are full of threshold beings. They stand at doors, beside rivers, near ladders, inside caverns, before heavenly courts, and along the dangerous paths of the dead. They may question, protect, punish, guide, or simply prevent the unprepared from entering. In Egyptian funerary texts, gatekeepers and guardian beings can have strange names and fierce forms. Some hold knives, some breathe fire, some must be addressed correctly. Their terrifying appearance does not always mean they are evil. They may be protective forces, dangerous only to what is disordered, impure, or hostile to the sacred road. You pass near one of them and feel the air cool sharply. Its face is not an animal you recognize. It has the long stillness of a jackal, the alertness of a bird, and the heavy patience of a stone lion. Its eyes do not blink. Around its neck hangs a collar of small shapes like stars or seeds. It carries no weapon, but one hand rests over its chest as though guarding an unseen name. You remember that ancient people often place protective beings at real entrances. In Mesopotamia, monumental guardian figures such as Lamassu stood at palace gateways, combining human, animal, and divine features. They were not funerary gatekeepers in a simple sense, but they show how strongly ancient architecture linked thresholds with supernatural protection. A doorway was vulnerable, a palace gate was politically and spiritually charged. To pass through was to enter a space of authority, and authority needed guardians. The passage of the soul borrowed from that logic. If earthly kings needed guards, how much more would divine courts? Yet the guardians of the dead are not all royal in feeling. Some seem more domestic, almost like the unseen powers families invoke to protect a sleeping house. Others feel like memories of desert animals, night birds, scavengers, and creatures that appeared near tombs. Ancient people lived closer to animals than many modern listeners do. Jackals moved near burial grounds, birds circled over fields, snakes appeared in walls, reeds, and tomb spaces. The forms of divine and demonic beings may have grown partly from this closeness, where fear and respect shared the same breath. A curious fringe thought walks beside you here. Some modern interpreters have wondered whether guardian beings were not merely imagined monsters, but encoded descriptions of altered states, ritual masks, or temple performers who appeared during initiation and funerary ceremonies. The animal-headed figure could be a god in myth, a priest in costume, a painted tomb image, and an inner psychological force all at once. The evidence is uneven, and one must be careful not to turn every god into a disguised human actor. Still, ancient rituals often used masks, images, sacred clothing, and dramatic movement. A guardian may have been encountered by the eye, the ear, the mind, and the soul in different ways. The corridor widens. More figures appear, each stationed beside a threshold that seems to lead nowhere. One has a face covered by a linen veil. One has no head, but a ring of small flames where the head should be. One is tiny, no taller than a child, yet the space around it bends with enormous force. One is only a pair of hands emerging from darkness, palms open, neither welcoming nor refusing. They are unsettling, but they do not attack. This restraint matters. Modern imagination often turns guardians into villains, but ancient guardians are more complicated. They preserve boundaries, they maintain order, they enforce the difference between outside and inside, profane and sacred, unprepared and prepared, living and dead, human and divine. A guardian may be frightening because the boundary itself is frightening. You walk past them slowly, and each one seems to remove one kind of certainty. You had imagined heaven as light, but here are shadows. You had imagined the soul as free, but here are rules. You had imagined passage as upward, but here are side doors, hidden courts, blocked chambers, and silent watchers whose purpose is not explained. Scholars continue to debate how ancient people understood beings often translated as demons. In some traditions, these entities are not evil in a modern absolute sense. They may be dangerous powers, disease spirits, protective forces, servants of gods, boundary figures, or personifications of specific threats. Translation can flatten them. A word like demon may bring later assumptions that do not fit the ancient setting. The same being may terrify one traveller and protect another. Depending on context, ritual, and relationship to divine order, you feel this ambiguity in the air. A figure with a blade stands beside a narrow black doorway. The blade is polished like water, yet the hand holding it is steady, not eager. It is not seeking violence. It is preventing chaos. Another guardian holds a bowl filled with ash and flowers. Another carries a measuring reed. Another leans on a staff carved with signs of storms, grain, and sleeping animals. Each one seems to belong to a different layer of human fear. Fear of being lost. Fear of being judged. Fear of entering what is not meant for you. Fear of being unprotected in a place where old names no longer work. And perhaps, beneath them all, fear that the universe might have doors that do not open simply because you want them to. The guardians stand in answer to that fear, not as comfort, exactly, but as structure. They tell the soul that the unseen world is not formless. It has keepers. It has law. It has memory. It has beings whose strange faces remind you that human categories are too small for sacred space. You pass a guardian whose face is hidden beneath a mask of beaten gold. Its body is wrapped in dark blue cloth embroidered with tiny white points. It might be a star being, or a priest, or the dream of a priest, or only a symbol made from everything the night sky does to the imagination. As you come near, it lowers its head slightly. The gesture is almost kind. It may be that these guardians do not stand to keep the soul away from heaven. Some have wondered whether they stand to keep the soul from rushing too quickly into what it cannot yet bear. A threshold is mercy as much as restriction. A gate slows the traveller, a guardian asks the traveller to become aware. You continue through the dim hall, and the guardians grow fewer. Their shapes recede into walls, pillars, smoke, and memory. No final explanation follows them. They are not solved. They remain what ancient guardians often are: half image, half function, half terror, half protection, more than any clean category can hold. Far ahead, a faint vertical line appears, like light beneath a closed door. You walk toward it with a slower heart. The watchers have not harmed you. They have not embraced you. They have only reminded you that every sacred passage has protectors, and every protector wears the face of the boundary it serves. Behind you, one pair of eyes closes. Ahead, the line of light widens. The line of light opens into height. Not brightness at first, but height. The feeling of space rising farther than the eyes can easily follow. You stand at the foot of something that is not exactly a staircase, not exactly a mountain, and not exactly a tower. It seems to contain all three. Its lower stones are broad and worn, like steps shaped by generations of feet. Above them, terraces climb into shadow. Beyond the terraces, a pale path rises as if drawn upward by stars. The air smells of cold stone, cedar beams, and old dust stirred from places where no ordinary wind has entered. Somewhere high above, a bird cries once, though you cannot see any sky wide enough to hold it. The sound falls slowly, as if distance itself has become thick. You have reached the ladder between worlds. Ancient people often imagine the connection between earth and heaven through vertical forms. Mountains touch the sky. Towers rose above cities. Temple platforms lifted sacred space above ordinary ground. Trees reached downward with roots and upward with branches. Ladders appeared in dreams and visions as fragile bridges between the human and divine. The soul, the king, the prophet, the shaman, or the dreamer did not simply wander sideways into mystery. They climbed. You place one foot on the lower step. The stone is cold through your sandal, but not dead. It feels like something that has held ceremonies, footsteps, offerings, and whispered names. Each step is wide enough for a procession. You can almost hear the faint echo of sandals, bells, and low chanting from a world that has vanished except in fragments. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats rose in stepped forms above the flatness of the land. They were built from mud brick, often with baked brick facing, and connected to temple complexes and civic ritual. Their exact symbolic meanings remain debated, but many scholars understand them as elevated sacred structures that linked city, temple, earth, and divine presence. They were not tombs like Egyptian pyramids. They were part of a living ritual landscape, associated with gods whose temples anchored the identity of cities. Standing at the imagined base of such a structure, you can understand why the idea of ascent became sacred. The land around the great river valleys could be flat for long distances. A raised platform changed the horizon. It made the temple visible from afar. It separated the god's house from ordinary streets, workshops, pens, markets, and canals. To climb was to leave one kind of world and approach another. The steps continue upward. Along the side walls, you notice images carved in low relief. A mountain with streams flowing from its sides. A tree whose roots enter dark water while its branches hold stars. A tower with priests climbing in a line. A narrow ladder leaning toward a crescent moon. These are not from one civilization only. They feel like gathered symbols from many places, arranged as if the human imagination has been repeating the same gesture in different languages. The cosmic mountain appears across many traditions. In Mesopotamian thought, divine assembly and sacred geography could be associated with elevated places, even when the actual southern landscape was not mountainous. In later Near Eastern, Greek, Iranian, Indian, and other worlds, mountains often served as meeting points of earth and heaven. The mountain is visible, difficult, remote, and dangerous. It invites ascent, but not casually. The world tree is another old image, though its forms differ widely. It connects levels of existence, sometimes with underworld roots, earthly trunk, and heavenly branches. It offers a living version of the same structure, below, middle, above. In some traditions, souls, gods, birds, serpents, and ancestral powers move along or around it. Scholars debate how far such images can be compared across cultures without flattening important differences. But the recurrence of vertical symbolism is striking. You climb slowly and the air grows thinner. The path is not meant for hurry. That is part of its teaching. A ladder is humble compared with a gate. It doesn't open by command. It must be climbed one step at a time. A mountain is even slower. It asks for breath, balance, and patience. A tower is made by human labour, brick upon brick, season after season. All these images suggest that heaven, however imagined, was not merely reached by wishing. It required passage through levels. A curious fringe thought appears in the cool air. Some have wondered whether ancient stories of ladders, towers, and mountains preserve memories of ritual ascent performed in temples, where priests or rulers physically climbed staged architecture while reciting cosmic myths. The movement of the body through height may have created an inner experience of moving through worlds. This does not mean every sacred tower was a hidden machine of heaven, or that every story of ascent recalled one secret ceremony, but ritual movement and cosmic imagination often shaped each other. A person who climbs a sacred structure at dawn may feel, for a moment, that the sky is not only above, but near. You pause on a terrace. Far below, the passage of guardians has become a dark seam in the world. Far above, the next stretch of steps disappears into pale light. Around you, there are small basins set into the stone. Some contain water, some contain ash, some contain grains. One contains a single white feather. These offerings seem to belong to different lands and eras, but they share one quiet message. Ascent requires leaving something behind. The open scholarly uncertainty here is gentle but important. When ancient people built high temples, raised platforms, pyramids, towers, and sacred mountains in art or myth, How literally did they imagine these structures connecting to the divine? Were they symbolic centres, ritual stages, political monuments, cosmic diagrams, or physical invitations to the gods? The answer changes by culture and period. A ziggurat is not a pyramid. A pyramid is not a Greek mountain. A sacred tree is not a temple tower. Yet each reveals an urge to organise the universe vertically. You continue climbing. The steps narrow. The stone grows smoother, then rougher, then smooth again, as if you are passing through many ages of construction. You see mud brick under your hand, then limestone, then basalt, then wood polished by touch. The ladder between worlds is not one monument. It is made of every attempt to imagine an upper realm. At one point, the path becomes so narrow that you must walk carefully, one hand against the wall. The wall is covered in small marks, not words exactly, but counting signs, star points, handprints, and lines like measurements. The soul climbing here is not entering disorder, it is entering a structured ascent, where number, direction, level, and rhythm matter. Perhaps this is why 7 gates and layered heavens feel connected. A vertical universe invites stages. The soul rises, pauses, changes, and rises again. Each level is not only higher, but different. The ancient mind did not always imagine space as empty distance. Space had quality, a temple courtyard, a sanctuary, a mountain peak, a star field, and a hidden heaven were not interchangeable. Each demanded a different self. At last, the steps widen into a high platform. There is no roof here. Above you hangs a deep field of stars, closer than they should be. The air is silent, and the stone still holds the memory of sun, though no sun is visible. You turn and see that the path below has become almost invisible. Only the next height remains clear. You understand then that the ladder is not merely a way to rise. It is a way to be slowly changed by rising. The soul does not leap from dust to heaven. It learns height. It learns distance. It learns how small a human life can be without becoming meaningless. It learns that every sacred ascent is made from ordinary steps. And when you begin to move again, the stones ahead seem to breathe with cold light, each one waiting for the quiet pressure of your foot. The high platform opens into a road paved with pale stone. It runs straight for a while, then bends around a ridge of darkness where the stars seem to gather more densely. On either side of the road stand statues that have lost their faces. Some wear crowns, some hold staffs. Some sit with hands resting on their knees in the old posture of command. Their bodies are worn by wind, but their shapes still carry authority, as if power can remain visible long after names have broken away. You walk between them quietly. This is the road of kings who climbed first. Ancient history often preserves the dreams of rulers more clearly than the hopes of ordinary people. Kings had scribes. Kings had tombs. Kings had monuments, inscriptions, ritual specialists and court poets. Their names were carved into stone, pressed into clay, painted in tombs, and repeated in temple records. When ancient texts speak of ascent to heaven, union with gods, journeys among stars, or privileged access to divine realms, the traveller is often royal, priestly, heroic, or specially chosen. The road beneath your feet remembers that imbalance. In ancient Egypt, the earliest pyramid texts were written in royal tombs of the Old Kingdom. They contain spells and utterances meant to help the deceased king rise, transform, join the gods, and take a place among the imperishable stars. These texts are among the oldest large bodies of religious writing known from Egypt, and they give a powerful image of royal afterlife. The king is not merely buried, he ascends, he becomes radiant, he is helped by gods, protected by words, and lifted into a cosmic role. Yet this royal afterlife did not remain only royal forever. Over time, funerary texts and hopes once closely tied to kingship became more widely available in different forms to non-royal elites. Coffin texts and later funerary books, extended access to afterlife knowledge beyond the pyramid. Scholars sometimes describe this as a broadening of funerary privilege, though they debate how best to understand the social and religious changes involved. It was not a simple story of equality. Wealth, status, literacy, and ritual access still mattered deeply. You pass a seated statue whose crown has been chipped away. Its missing face seems more honest than a preserved one. It reminds you that royal claims to heaven were not only personal hopes, they were political theology. A king who could ascend, join the gods, or maintain cosmic order after death was not merely powerful in life. His rule was woven into the structure of the universe. The afterlife could become a continuation of authority. In Mesopotamia, kingship also carried sacred weight, though the afterlife of Mesopotamian kings was not imagined in exactly the same way as Egyptian royal ascent. Kings built temples, restored cities, received divine favour, and presented themselves as chosen servants of gods. The Sumerian king list, with its astonishing reign lengths for early rulers before the flood, places kingship itself in a mythic depth of time. It says that kingship descended from heaven, a phrase that has fascinated historians, theologians, and modern mystery seekers alike. The phrase is powerful, but careful reading matters. In its historical context, it expresses sacred legitimacy and the divine origin of political order. It does not need to mean that literal rulers fell from the sky. Still, the image has a strange beauty. Kingship descends from heaven, and kings dream of ascending back toward the divine. Power moves down, the soul tries to move up. A curious fringe tidbit lingers here like a shadow beside the statues. Some modern interpreters have wondered whether the extraordinary reign lengths and pre-flood kings in Mesopotamian tradition preserve echoes of a forgotten age, a symbolic memory of priest kings, ancestor figures, or even beings later imagined as more than human. Mainstream scholarship usually treats these reigns as mythic, ideological, numerical, or theological rather than literal chronology. But the very existence of such lists shows how ancient people placed authority into deep time, beyond normal human scale. You continue along the road and the statues change. They are no longer only kings. Some wear priestly garments, some carry writing tools, some hold offering bowls, some are warriors with broken spears, some are women with elaborate headdresses, perhaps queens, priestesses, goddesses, or donors whose identities are now uncertain. Ancient power was not held by kings alone. Temples had priesthoods. Royal women could be ritually significant. Scribes could preserve memory. Officials could control grain, labour, land, and access to sacred institutions. The soul's journey, as preserved in texts, often belongs to those who had the means to commission guidance. This is a quiet but important detail. When you read a funerary spell, a royal inscription, or a tomb scene, you're often reading the afterlife of people with resources. Their passage was prepared with objects, words, architecture, and specialists. An ordinary person may have had deep beliefs, strong family rights, and a meaningful relationship with the dead, but far fewer traces remain. The silence of the poor is not absence of belief. It is absence of preservation. The road grows narrower. Ahead, you see a procession moving without sound. A king walks at the front, wearing a crown that seems too heavy for a human head. Behind him comes a priest with a lamp, then a scribe holding a tablet, then a musician carrying a small harp, then workers carrying baskets of clay, stone, bread, beer, linen, and oil. Their forms are transparent, as if made from memory rather than flesh. They are not reenacting a single historical ceremony. They are showing you how many hands supported one person's sacred ascent. No king climbed alone. That may be the hidden truth of this road. Every royal afterlife depended on labour. Quarry workers cut stone, farmers grew grain, brewers made beer, weavers prepared linen, scribes copied words, Priests performed rites, artists painted gods, mourners wailed, guards watched doors, boatmen carried materials, cooks fed the living workers who built the houses of the dead. A king might be shown rising toward heaven, but beneath that image stands an entire society. Scholars continue to debate how ancient people balanced personal piety, political ideology, ritual necessity, and social hierarchy in royal funerary monuments. Were these monuments expressions of belief, tools of state power, economic engines, cosmic machines, memorials, or all of these at once? The answer is layered. A pyramid can be a tomb, a sacred form, a political statement, a labour project, and a cosmic symbol without ceasing to be any one of them. You look again at the silent procession. The king's face is calm, but the workers behind him look tired. This detail does not ruin the sacred mood, it makes it more human. Ancient afterlife dreams were built from the same world that produced taxes, harvests, commands, debts, festivals, and hunger. Heaven was imagined by people who knew hierarchy. It is not surprising that the oldest preserved maps often give the clearest road to those at the top. Yet the story does not end with privilege. Over centuries, sacred ideas move, texts are adapted, rituals spread, images once royal become available to others, though never equally to all. Ancestors without crowns still receive offerings. Household dead still matter. Local shrines still hold prayers. The soul of a poor person may not be painted on papyrus, but that does not mean it was thought to have no path. It means the path was held in different materials, food, tears, spoken names, grave soil, and the memory of kin. You pass the final statue on the road. It is unfinished. One side is polished, the other still rough with tool marks. The face has never been carved. It could become a king, a priest, a farmer, a child, or no one at all. You stop beside it and feel the cool stone under your fingertips. Perhaps this unfinished figure is closer to the truth than the crowned ones. The journey through the gates may have been preserved through royal imagination, but its emotional centre belongs to everyone. Every human life stands before the same final silence. Every name fears erasure. Every body returns to earth. Every mourner wonders where the beloved has gone. The road of kings begins to fade into a softer path. The statues remain behind you, solemn and broken, still guarding the memory of those who had their ascent written in stone. Ahead, the path lowers slightly, not downward into darkness, but inward into a quieter chamber, where crowns and titles no longer seem useful. And as you walk away from the royal road, you feel another layer loosen, not respect for the dead, not the grandeur of ancient belief, only the illusion that power can carry a soul farther than truth. The path narrows into a chamber of balance. There is no throne at the centre, no crowned figure waiting above you, no royal road, no procession, no music of harps or low temple drums. The space is quiet and almost bare. Its walls are the colour of old limestone, pale and faintly yellow in the dim light. The floor is smooth, but not polished. It feels like a place made for standing still. At the centre of the chamber rests a scale. It is simple at first glance. A beam, 2 hanging pans, a central post, a small shadow beneath it. Yet the longer you look, the less ordinary it becomes. One pan is empty. The other is also empty. Nothing moves. Nothing has yet been placed there. But the entire room seems to lean toward it, as if every stone is waiting for a weight too subtle to see. You understand that the soul has reached the question of burden. Not wealth, not title, not memory alone. Something quieter and more difficult. The invisible weight of a life. Ancient people did not always speak of morality the way modern people do. Their ideas were woven through order, purity, obligation, balance, ritual correctness, social harmony, loyalty to gods, respect for kin, and the maintenance of the world as it should be. A wrong act was not only private guilt, it could disturb the household, the city, the dead, the gods, or the fragile rhythm between human life and cosmic order. In Egypt, Ma'at was more than truth in a narrow sense. It meant order, balance, justice, rightness, and the proper arrangement of the world. Kings were expected to uphold it. Gods were associated with it. Ordinary people invoked it through ethical living, social conduct, and ritual order. The famous image of the heart weighed against the feather captures this beautifully, but also compresses a vast concept into one unforgettable scene. You step closer to the scale. The air smells faintly of papyrus, dry stone, and something like feathers warmed by sunlight. There is no visible judge, but the chamber feels attentive. Your footsteps do not echo. They are absorbed at once, as if the room is not interested in sound, only weight. The heart mattered deeply in Egyptian thought. It was not only a physical organ, it was connected with mind, memory, will, emotion, and moral selfhood. In funerary belief, the heart could testify for or against the deceased. This is why heart scarabs might be placed with the dead, sometimes inscribed with words asking the heart not to stand against its owner in judgment. It is a strange and intimate idea, that something within you knows you so completely it might speak when you cannot control it. You imagine such a scarab resting on a wrapped chest, green or dark stone against pale linen, small, polished, quiet. It is an object, but also a plea. Do not betray me. Or perhaps just more gently, remember me with mercy. The open uncertainty here is important. Scholars continue to discuss whether the judgment scene reflects a fully moral evaluation, a ritualized assurance that the deceased had been properly equipped, a theological drama of cosmic order, or a combination of all these meanings. In many papyri, the dead person's success seems almost expected when the right words are provided. Yet the imagery itself preserves real ethical seriousness. The soul stands near balance, and balance must mean something. The chamber darkens slightly, and on the wall behind the scale faint images appear. A person returns a borrowed measure of grain. A worker cheats a measure by a handful. A daughter brings water to an aging mother. A man speaks falsely in a dispute. A priest performs a washing carefully. A merchant hides a flaw in cloth. A child steals figs and laughs. A judge accepts a gift and looks away. The images are ordinary, not dramatic. This makes them more powerful. The weight of a life is often made of small things. Ancient law codes and wisdom texts from the Near East show that people care deeply about justice, debt, property, injury, marriage, inheritance, false accusation, and protection of vulnerable people, even if their societies remained unequal by modern standards. The Code of Hammurabi, for example, is famous today, though it was not a modern law book in the way a current legal code would be used. It presents royal justice, social hierarchy, penalties, and ideals of order under divine authority. Its existence reminds you that ancient morality lived not only in temples, but in disputes over fields, wages, bodies, and households. The soul's hidden weight is not abstract. It is measured in how life touched other lives. Yet there is a curious fringe thought beside the scale. Some interpreters have wondered whether ancient weighing scenes preserve an older mystery of vibration, balance, or subtle substance, as if the soul had a measurable quality beyond metaphor. Later mystical traditions sometimes speak of lightness, heaviness, purity, density, and ascent as though inner life has a texture. There is no archaeological proof that ancient Egyptians or Mesopotamians meant this in a physical sense recognizable to modern science. Still, the metaphor persists because it feels strangely exact. Guilt is heavy, grief is heavy, relief is light. Forgiveness changes the body before it changes any doctrine. You look down at your own hands. They appear almost transparent in the pale light. The warmth left by the firegate still rests somewhere inside you, but it does not erase the feeling of being accountable. Purification is not the same as innocence. Forgetting pain is not the same as undoing harm. Being witnessed is not the same as being balanced. The scale waits. No one places your heart upon it. No feather is lowered. Instead, the room itself begins to feel like a scale. Your memories move in one pan, your intentions in another, your kindnesses, your failures, your excuses, your fears, your moments of courage, your careless cruelties, your hidden tenderness, not one by one, like items in a ledger, but all at once, like weather gathering over a field. This may be closer to how ancient moral imagination worked than a simple list of sins. The world had to be kept in order. Every person, from king to labourer, lived inside relationships that required measure. Too much pride, too much hunger, too much violence, too much neglect, and the balance tilted. The scale trembles, only slightly. You remember that in Mesopotamia, justice was tied to the gods and to the king's duty to establish order, protect the weak, and maintain proper relationships. But Mesopotamian afterlife texts do not present the same well-known moral weighing scene found in Egypt. Their underworld could feel darker, more communal, less focused on moral reward in the later sense. This difference matters. The ancient world did not agree on what happened to moral weight after death. Some traditions made judgment central. Others emphasized burial, status, ritual, memory of Darkkiari or divine favour. Some combined these concerns. The soul's fate was never one single ancient idea. The chamber seems to honour that disagreement. Its scale remains empty, as if refusing to turn one culture's image into a universal rule. Yet it keeps the question alive. If life has weight, where is that weight held? In the heart, in the name, in the memory of others, in the justice of gods, in the order of the cosmos, or only in the stories the living tell? You breathe slowly. The air feels thinner now. The scale stops trembling. Nothing announces success. Nothing declares failure. There is only the sense that balance is not a verdict delivered once, but a condition the soul must learn to endure. To be balanced is not to have lived without error. It is to stop hiding from the true shape of what was lived. At the far end of the chamber, a low door appears. It is made of pale wood, worn smooth by hands. Above it hangs no symbol except a small carved feather, so faint you almost miss it. The door opens a little, and a quiet draught moves through the room. It smells of stone corridors, distant lamps, and old cedar. You step away from the scale. Behind you, the empty pans remain suspended in perfect stillness. They have taken nothing visible from you. Yet something has changed. The soul feels less defended, less eager to explain, less burdened by the need to appear lighter than it is. As you pass through the low door, you understand that the hidden weight was never meant only to condemn. It was meant to teach the soul the shape of honesty. And honesty, in the ancient darkness, is a kind of light. The low door opens into a city that cannot decide whether it is made of stone or light. At first, you see only a corridor lined with tall columns. Their bases are dark, their shafts pale, their capitals shaped like flowers, horns, wings, and folded reeds. Then the corridor widens, and you notice that it is not a corridor at all, but a street beneath an unseen sky. Walls rise on both sides. Courtyards open into deeper courtyards. Stairways lead to terraces. Doorways glow with soft amber lamps. Far ahead, a palace roof shines faintly, as if moonlight has settled into its tiles and chosen to remain there. This is heaven imagined as architecture, not clouds, not empty radiance, not a place without shape, a city, a court, a temple, a palace, a house with rooms that can be entered only in the proper order. Ancient people built their hopes from the materials they knew: mud brick, limestone, cedar, bronze, lapis-coloured paint, gold leaf, carved thresholds, painted ceilings, polished floors, curtains, altars, platforms, sealed doors. When they imagined divine realms, they often gave them structure. You walk slowly along the luminous street. The air smells of cedar smoke, beeswax, cool plaster, and something sweet like dates left in a bowl. No crowd fills the city, no market voice rises, no animal calls from a pen. Yet the place does not feel abandoned. It feels prepared. Lamps burn in niches. Water rests in basins. Doorways stand slightly open. The city waits with the calm of a temple before dawn. In Mesopotamian thought, gods had houses. Temples were not merely symbolic meeting halls. They were understood as residences of divine presence, maintained through ritual care. Deities were clothed, fed, honoured, sung to, carried in procession, and served through elaborate systems involving priests, workers, offerings, storage, land, and festivals. A god's temple could stand at the centre of a city's identity, economy, and cosmic order. If gods lived in houses, then it was natural for the unseen world to have buildings. In Egypt, sacred architecture also shaped religious imagination. Temples were built as ordered spaces, often aligned with cosmic ideas, decorated with mythic scenes, offering rituals and images of kings before gods. Tombs could become houses for eternity, filled with scenes of life, offerings, texts, and symbolic architecture. The dead did not always seek an abstract afterlife. They sought a place where existence could be sustained, renewed, protected, and made meaningful. You pass through a courtyard whose floor is paved with dark blue stone. Tiny flecks within it catch the light like stars underwater. Along the walls are reliefs of people carrying offerings: bread, beer jars, flowers, linen, oil, birds, fruit, and incense. The figures are still, but the objects they carry feel strangely alive. In ancient tomb and temple art, representation could have ritual force. An image of an offering was not only a picture in the modern sense, it could participate in sustaining the divine or the dead, especially when joined with words and ritual action. This idea changes the way you look at the celestial city. Its painted bread might feed, its carved doors might open, its lamps might truly guide. The architecture of heaven is not merely decorative, it works. Yet scholars still debate how ancient people understood the power of images. Were images literally effective, symbolically potent, ritually activated, or socially meaningful? The answer may be all of these. Depending on context, modern categories can be too rigid. In ancient religious life, image, word, object, and action could merge. A carved loaf and a spoken formula could make presence possible in a way neither alone could fully explain. The street turns gently. You find yourself before a gate made of lapis-coloured stone, or perhaps only painted to resemble lapis. In the ancient Near East, lapis lazuli was precious, imported from distant regions, associated with luxury, divinity, and deep blue brilliance. Its colour resembled the heavens, night, and sacred depth. When ancient texts describe divine or royal splendour using blue stone, gold, silver, and shining materials, they are not simply showing wealth. They are creating an atmosphere of otherworldly order. The gate is open. Inside lies a hall so tall that its ceiling disappears into darkness. Along the sides are columns shaped like palm trunks. At the far end is a raised platform, but no god sits there. Instead, a low table holds bowls of water, bread, dates, and incense. You realize that even here, in a heavenly architecture, the most sacred objects are still the simplest: food, water, smoke, light. A curious fringe interpretation hovers around such spaces. Some have wondered whether descriptions of divine palaces and heavenly halls preserve memories of actual temple interiors that only priests or rulers could enter, later magnified into cosmic geography. The heavenly court may be a sacred reflection of restricted architecture on earth. Or perhaps earthly temples were built as reflections of a divine pattern believed to exist beyond human sight. The evidence cannot settle the direction completely. Earth may mirror heaven, or heaven may be imagined through earth. Ancient worship often moved comfortably in both directions. You continue deeper into the hall. Your footsteps are silent now. The floor feels cool through your sandals. The walls are covered with scenes that do not belong to one country alone. A reed marsh beneath a crescent moon, a sunboat crossing night waters, a mountain palace above clouds, a walled garden with 4 streams, a throne room with winged beings, a city descending in light, a field of grain where the dead harvest without exhaustion. Each image comes from a different ancient or later sacred imagination, yet together they show how often heaven became a place one could enter, inhabit, and recognize. The human mind seems to need rooms. Even mystery becomes more bearable when it has a doorway. You walk beneath a ceiling painted with stars, and the city seems to breathe. Somewhere above you is a roof, and beyond that roof, another sky. This is the strange logic of sacred architecture. It contains the cosmos in miniature. A temple ceiling can become heaven. A floor can become earth. A sanctuary can become the point where worlds meet. A tomb chamber can become both burial place and rebirth chamber. A gate can be made of wood or stone, and still open inward toward eternity. The open uncertainty here is not whether ancient architecture mattered. It clearly did. The uncertainty is how far you can go in reconstructing belief from space. A temple plan may suggest processional movement, hierarchy, restricted access, or cosmic symbolism. But stones alone do not speak every prayer said within them. A tomb wall may show paradise, but it cannot tell you the exact feeling of the person who paid for it, or the family who visited. Architecture guides interpretation, but it does not complete it. You reach the far platform. The low table rests before you. The bowls are untouched. The incense gives off a thin silver smoke that rises without dispersing. For a moment, the hall around you seems to become a body, columns like bones, doorways like mouths, chambers like lungs, lamps like eyes. The ancient idea of a sacred building as a living place does not feel metaphorical here. It feels almost literal. The divine house receives, holds, feeds, shelters, and remembers. Perhaps heaven, when imagined as architecture, answers a very human longing to not be lost in endless space, to arrive somewhere prepared, to find a doorway that opens, a floor that holds, a lamp that has not gone out. The palace city grows softer around the edges. Its walls remain, but they begin to feel less solid, as if architecture itself is only one form the unknown takes when it wishes to be gentle. You understand that ancient people built heaven from temples because temples were where order touched fear. They built it from palaces because palaces embodied power. They built it from houses because the dead still needed belonging. And as you leave the high hall, you feel the city folding behind you like a painted screen, not destroyed, not denied, only becoming quiet. The celestial buildings have shown you that even the soul's highest dreams are shaped by hands that once carried brick, mixed plaster, carved wood, poured oil, lit lamps, and closed doors against the night. Ahead, a narrower passage waits. Its walls are covered not with images, but with lines of writing, some sharp, some faded, some broken off in the middle of a word. The writing begins at shoulder height, then climbs beyond reach. It covers the passage in rows, columns, curves, boxes, and narrow bands of signs. Some lines are carved into stone. Some are painted in faded black and red. Some look pressed into clay tablets set into the wall like bricks. Some appear on strips of papyrus that should have turned to dust long ago. Yet here they remain, trembling faintly in the still air. The passage feels less like a hallway than a library built for someone who could not afford to be lost. You walk beside the words and the silence changes. It becomes a reading silence, not empty, not mute, but full of voices that once knew the right syllables. Priests, scribes, mourners, temple singers, royal ritualists, careful copyists leaning over low tables, students repeating difficult signs until their hands ached. Their words remain, but their breath is gone. You can almost hear them anyway, because ancient writing was rarely only for the eye. It wanted to be spoken. These are the lost instructions. Ancient people often believed that passage through the unseen world required knowledge. Not knowledge in the modern sense of facts gathered for curiosity, but practical sacred knowledge. Names, spells, passwords, hymns, gestures, offerings, directions, warnings, and formulas. The dead might need to know what to say at a gate, how to answer a guardian, how to avoid a danger, how to join a divine company, how to become effective in the next world. In Egypt, funerary texts served this guiding purpose in many forms across many centuries. The pyramid texts, coffin texts, Book of the Dead, Amduat, Book of Gates, and other compositions offered images, utterances, and maps of cosmic regions. They were not all used in the same way, and they belonged to different historical contexts. Some were royal, some became available to broader elites, some focused on the solar journey, some equipped the deceased with words of power. Together they show a world where the afterlife could be navigated through carefully preserved speech. You place your hand near a painted line, not touching it. The pigment is dim but still alive. Red marks may indicate dangerous beings, headings, emphasis, or ritual importance, depending on the text and period. Black signs carry the main body of words. In a tomb, such words could do more than describe. They could activate, protect, identify, and transform. A phrase written correctly might function like a key. A name might open a passage. A spell might become a tool placed into the hands of the dead. The idea is strange only if words are treated as weak. Ancient ritual did not treat them that way. In Mesopotamia, incantations, prayers, omen texts, laments, and ritual instructions formed part of a large scholarly and religious tradition. Scribes preserved knowledge in tablet series, copied older works, and trained within institutions connected to temples and palaces. Some texts addressed illness, demons, purification, divine anger, ghosts, or protection. Others recorded omens from stars, livers, dreams, births, and unusual events. The universe was readable, but only by those trained to read it. The wall seems to murmur with that trained attention. A curious fringe possibility moves through the passage like a draft. Some have wondered whether afterlife passwords and gate names hint at a secret initiatory language, a coded system known only to ritual specialists. In later mystical traditions, names of angels, divine palaces, seals, and spoken formulas become central to ascent. It is possible that some of these traditions preserve older habits of sacred secrecy, where knowledge itself was a threshold. But caution is necessary. A difficult text is not automatically a secret code. Sometimes it is difficult because it comes from another world of thought, damaged manuscripts, technical ritual language, or translation across centuries. You continue walking and the texts become more broken. A line begins with a name, then the stone is missing. A spell promises safe passage, but the next words are gone. A guardian is described by colour and gesture, but not by location. A gate is named, yet the name is damaged beyond recovery. The effect is more haunting than any complete doctrine. The soul may have needed instructions, but history has misplaced many of them. Archaeology preserves what chance allows. A dry climate saves papyrus. A burned palace hardens clay tablets. A sealed tomb protects paint. A collapsed wall buries inscriptions where later builders cannot scrape them away. But damp soil, war, looting, reuse, insects, careless excavation, and time itself can erase whole libraries of belief. For every text studied in a museum, countless words were spoken and never written, written and destroyed, copied badly, misunderstood, or lost before anyone knew they mattered. This uncertainty is not a small problem. It shapes everything. When scholars reconstruct ancient afterlife beliefs, they work with uneven evidence. Royal texts may survive while village rites vanish. Elite tombs may be preserved while ordinary graves are disturbed. A famous manuscript may become central only because it happened to remain readable. The map of the soul is therefore partly a map of preservation. What survived guides what we think ancient people believed. But survival is not the same as importance. The passage grows narrower. You notice small illustrations between lines of text. A boat travelling through darkness, a serpent coiled around a doorway, a figure holding knives, a field divided into neat rectangles, a ladder reaching upward, a seated scribe, a dead person raising both hands in praise. Each image seems to explain the words, and the words explain the image. Yet neither gives itself completely. The relationship between text and picture is like breathing in and out. You stop before one damaged panel. Only a few signs remain. They seem to instruct the traveller to speak something at a gate. But the crucial phrase is gone. The missing words are a small wound in the wall. You imagine a dead person standing at the threshold, unable to remember. You imagine a priest once chanting the line perfectly. You imagine a scribe copying it by lamplight, unaware that this one break would become a silence thousands of years later. Perhaps the lost instructions are the most honest part of the journey. No human tradition has preserved the whole road. Even the most elaborate funerary texts are partial. They come from particular communities, particular eras, particular theological systems. They tell you what some people hoped, feared, paid for, recited, painted, copied, and buried with their dead. They do not tell you everything. They cannot. And yet the fragments still guide, not by giving a complete map, but by showing the shape of ancient concern. The dead needed help. The unseen world had structure. Words mattered. Names mattered. Order mattered. Memory mattered. The living had responsibilities. The soul was vulnerable but not abandoned. You move again, and the passage begins to dim. The writing thins until only isolated signs remain. Floating on the walls like stars at dawn, a name, a gate, a command to open, a request for protection, a line about not being turned back, a praise to a god whose full title is lost, a warning against a being whose face is no longer visible. At the end of the passage there is no grand door, only a curtain made of dark linen hanging still. You stand before it and listen. Behind you are the walls of instructions, damaged but persistent. Ahead is a place where written guidance may no longer be enough. The soul has carried words as far as words can travel. You reach out and touch the curtain. The cloth is cool, soft, and faintly dusty, like something stored in a temple chest for many generations. As it parts, you feel that another layer has loosened inside you. Not language itself, but the belief that language can protect you from every mystery. Some roads can be named. Some must be entered. The curtain opens into a room of sleep. Not ordinary sleep. Not the tired closing of the body after labour, but the kind of sleep ancient people approached with caution, hope, and ritual care. The chamber is low and long, lit by lamps set near the floor. Their flames do not rise straight. They lean gently, as if listening to a breath you cannot hear. The air smells of wool blankets, dried herbs, warm oil, and the faint mineral dampness of stone that has spent centuries beneath earth. Along the walls are sleeping places. Some are simple mats, some are carved benches, some are narrow beds with raised headrests, some are only outlines in dust, as if dreamers once lay there and left the shape of their bodies behind. Above each resting place, small images appear, a hand lifted in prayer, an eye, a star, a coiled serpent, a bowl of water, a bird with spread wings, a doorway half open. You understand that this is not the sleep of escape. It is the sleep of visitation. In many ancient cultures, dreams were not treated as random private images. They could be messages, warnings, diagnoses, omens, divine encounters, or journeys of the soul. Mesopotamian texts include dream omens and interpretations, showing that dreams could be read as meaningful signs. Egyptian texts and images also reveal interest in dreams, especially as spaces where gods might communicate. Greek and Roman traditions later developed temple sleep practices, often called incubation, in which a person slept in a sacred place hoping for healing, instruction, or a divine dream. You walk between the sleeping places, careful not to disturb the silence. A folded cloak rests on one mat. A clay cup sits beside another. In a shallow bowl, the remains of burned herbs have cooled to grey powder. Someone once came here with a question. Perhaps a sickness. Perhaps grief. Perhaps fear of the dead. Perhaps the need to know whether a god had turned away. The body lay down, but the mind entered a road. This is where the living sometimes approach the paths usually reserved for souls. The line between dream and death has always been thin. A sleeping person lies still, eyes closed, silent, breathing softly. They travel inward and return with images. A dead person lies still, eyes closed, silent, and does not return in the same way. Ancient people noticed the resemblance. They also noticed the difference. Sleep became a small rehearsal of departure, a nightly crossing whose rules no one fully understood. You sit for a moment on the edge of a stone bench. It is cool beneath your hand, worn smooth by imagined bodies. The lamp beside it gives a low golden glow. On the wall above, a painted figure lies asleep while a taller figure stands at the foot of the bed, one hand raised in blessing. The taller figure's face has faded. It might be a god, a priest, an ancestor, or the dream itself given human form. A mainstream historical detail settles naturally here. In the ancient Greek world, healing sanctuaries associated with Asclepius became famous places where the sick might sleep and receive dreams connected with healing. Ritual preparation could include washing, offerings, fasting, prayer, and sleeping within the sacred precinct. Reports of cures were sometimes inscribed, though their exact interpretation remains debated. Were they records of miraculous healing, temple propaganda, personal testimony, ritual drama, or a combination of all these? The answer may differ case by case. The dream room holds that uncertainty without resolving it. You rise and continue. The lamps reveal a narrow pool in the centre of the chamber. Its water is black and completely still. Above it, the ceiling is painted with stars, but the stars are not arranged like the night sky you know. They curve in spirals, ladders, rivers, and gate shapes. The pool reflects them, making it seem as though the dreamer could fall upward if they lean too far. A curious fringe idea appears in this reflection. Some have wondered whether ancient dream journeys, trance states, and temple sleep experiences helped shape later maps of heavenly ascent. If a person dreamed of rising through doors of light, meeting beings, hearing secret names, or receiving instructions from the dead, such experiences could become part of religious storytelling. This does not mean all afterlife texts came from dreams, or that dreams give literal access to other worlds. But dreams were a major way ancient people encountered the unseen, and the unseen often borrowed the language of dreams. The chamber grows quieter around you. You imagine a woman lying on a mat, wrapped in wool, listening to temple sounds fade after dusk. She has brought an offering, perhaps a small cake, perhaps oil, perhaps only a whispered promise. Her child is ill, or her husband has died, or she has felt haunted by a repeating dream of water and doors. She waits for sleep not as rest, but as a meeting. The lamp lowers, the priest's voice disappears. The god may come, or may remain silent. This possibility of silence is important. Ancient dream practices depended on hope. But not every dream brought clarity. Some dreams were confusing, some were frightening, some required interpretation by specialists. Some may have been ignored if they didn't fit expected forms. In Mesopotamia, dream omens could be categorized, interpreted, and ritually managed. A bad dream might require action to avert danger. A good dream might reassure. But the boundary between divine message and ordinary dream was not always obvious. Scholars continue to debate how ancient dream reports should be read. A dream written in a text may describe an actual personal experience, a literary device, a political claim, a ritual model, or a theological statement. When a king says a god appeared in a dream and commanded a temple to be built, is that a record of inner experience, a legitimation of royal action, or both? Ancient categories may not separate these possibilities as modern readers do. You look into the black pool for a moment. The surface shows a road of pale dust beneath a moon. Then a gate. Then a face you almost know. Then only water. The room seems to suggest that dreams do not offer certainty. They offer contact without possession. They open, then withdraw. Perhaps this is why dreams belong so naturally to the journey of the soul. They are fragments of another order entering ordinary life. They bring images from somewhere beyond waking control. They teach the living how it feels to travel without moving the body. The lamps flicker all at once. On the far wall, a series of painted scenes brightens in sequence. A sleeper lies down. A bird rises from the sleeper's chest. The bird passes over a river. It approaches a gate where a figure waits. It receives something small and bright. Perhaps a seed, perhaps a star, perhaps a word. Then it returns to the sleeping body before dawn. The image is not from one known text exactly, but it gathers many ancient ideas: the detachable soul, the dream messenger, the divine sign, the return at morning. You feel a strange tenderness in it. The living wanted proof that the boundary could be crossed and survived. Dreams gave them a nightly hint, not proof in the hard sense, not a map one could measure, but an experience of leaving and returning, seeing and forgetting, receiving and doubting. A dream can feel more real than waking life and then dissolve at breakfast. This made it sacred and unreliable at the same time. The dream room begins to pale. The lamps burn lower. The mats become less distinct. The black pool turns grey, as if dawn has touched it from beneath. You hear, very faintly, the first sound of birds outside a temple wall that may no longer exist. The sleeper wakes. The question remains. The dream must be told quickly before it fades. You move toward the far exit, a narrow opening covered by hanging strings of small shells, beads, and bone charms. They click softly as you pass through them, like tiny teeth in the dark. Behind you, the chamber of sleep returns to silence. It has not answered whether dreams come from gods, ancestors, hidden memory, bodily disturbance, or the mind's own deep theatre. It has only shown that ancient people made room for all these possibilities, and sometimes built sacred places around the hope that night might speak. Ahead, the air grows cooler. You carry no dream in your hands, yet you feel as though something has visited you without leaving its name. The cool air leads you toward a downward path. It is not a fall. It is not a punishment. It is a slope so gentle that you notice it only after several steps. When the light behind you is lifted above your shoulders and the dark ahead has gathered near your feet. The walls are damp here, touched by a moisture that smells of stone, roots, and old rain. Somewhere below, water moves in a hidden channel, not loudly, but with the patient sound of something returning to its source. You have entered the question of return. It is one thing to imagine the soul climbing through gates, being named, cleansed, witnessed, weighed, transformed, and brought toward stillness. It is another to ask whether any traveller ever comes back. Ancient stories often insist that the boundary between life and death is severe. The dead belong to their realm, the living belong to theirs. Yet myth keeps finding exceptions. Gods descend and rise. Heroes enter forbidden regions. Shamans, prophets, priests, dreamers, and mourning lovers seek the road that should not be travelled twice. The return nobody explains is one of the oldest mysteries. You walk along the damp corridor, and the air brushes your face like breath from an underground chamber. The path is lined with small niches, and in each niche rests an object that suggests an unfinished passage: a broken oar, a clay cup, a bronze key green with age, a feather wrapped in thread, a small lamp with no oil, a bead shaped like an eye, a piece of bread hardened into stone. These are not treasures. They are clues that someone tried to cross a border and leave a sign behind. In Mesopotamian literature, the descent of Inanna is one of the most powerful stories of divine passage through 7 gates. Inanna descends to the underworld, and at each gate she is stripped of an item of power or identity until she stands exposed before the powers below. Her return requires complex divine intervention, substitution, and ritual consequence. It is not a simple victory story. It is a story about authority, loss, death, exchange, and the dangerous rules of the underworld. This matters because the 7 gates in that myth lead downward, not upward. Yet the pattern still echoes in any journey of the soul through layered thresholds. Passage changes the traveller, return is not easy. Something must be paid, surrendered, or replaced. The gate does not merely open and close, it transforms the one who crosses. You pause beside a niche holding a small carved figure of a woman with her hands folded over her chest. The face is worn smooth. She might be a goddess, a mourner, a servant, or a memory of all 3. The stone is cold when you touch it. Around its base are faint stains that look like dried water, though you cannot know whether they are tears, libations, mineral traces, or imagination. The uncertainty is fitting. Scholars continue to debate the meanings of descent and return myths. Are they seasonal symbols, reflecting vegetation dying and returning? Are they rituals of kingship, fertility, mourning, initiation, or cosmic balance? Are they psychological dramas about loss and transformation? Are they theological stories about the limits even gods must face? Different myths, and even different versions of the same myth, may carry several meanings at once. Ancient stories do not always choose one explanation. The corridor bends. Ahead, you see a faint light pulsing against the damp wall. It is not the fierce fire of purification, nor the cold order of stars. It is softer, like lamplight seen through a closed hand. As you come nearer, you find a round chamber where the path divides. One passage seems to continue downward into deeper shadow. Another curves upward toward a pale opening. A third disappears sideways behind hanging roots. Return is not one road. In Egyptian myth, Osiris is killed, dismembered, restored, and becomes lord of the dead. He does not return to ordinary earthly life in a simple human sense, but his restoration creates a powerful image of continuity beyond death. The sun god's nightly passage through darkness and rebirth at dawn also offers a cosmic model of return, not as a human ghost walking home, but as the renewal of order itself. Every morning becomes an answer to night. You stand in the round chamber and feel the old comfort of sunrise hidden inside that belief. But not every return is radiant. In many traditions, ghosts return because something is wrong: improper burial, unfinished duty, violent death, neglect, injustice, or intense longing can trouble the boundary. The returning dead may seek offerings, justice, recognition, or release. In such stories, return is not proof that death has been conquered. It is proof that relationships remain unsettled. This idea appears in many ancient societies. The dead could be honoured, feared, invoked, or appeased. Ritual specialists might deal with troubling spirits. Families might continue offerings to ancestors. The boundary between worlds was maintained through action, not assumed to be stable on its own. The living had to participate in keeping peace between realms. A curious fringe thought rises here, carried by the scent of damp roots. Some have wondered whether return myths preserve memories of near-death experiences, trance journeys, or ritual ordeals in which a person seemed to die, travelled in vision, and then came back changed. Such experiences are reported in many cultures, though interpreting them historically is difficult. Ancient texts rarely give the kind of clinical detail a modern reader might seek. Still, the repeated pattern of leaving the body, crossing a boundary, meeting beings, receiving knowledge, and returning with altered identity has fascinated interpreters for centuries. You look at the 3 passages again. The downward one smells of deep earth and river mud. The upward one smells of morning stone. The side passage smells of roots, animals, and old wood. Each could be a return, depending on what the traveller has become. A god may return as dawn. A hero may return with knowledge. A ghost may return as a complaint. A seed may return as a green shoot. A memory may return as a dream. You choose the side passage. It is narrow, and the roots brush your shoulders. They are dry in places and wet in others, like veins running through the dark. Soil presses close behind the stones. This path feels less celestial than the others, and that is why it feels true. Return does not always happen in palaces or star roads. Sometimes it happens in a kitchen when someone speaks the dead person's name. Sometimes it happens in a child who inherits a gesture. Sometimes it happens when an old song is sung again after years of silence. The soul may not return as itself. It may return as influence. That thought is both gentle and unsettling. Ancient ancestor traditions often understood the dead as continuing members of the household or lineage. They might bless, trouble, protect, or require attention. Modern people sometimes reduce this to superstition, but it also reflects a deep social truth. The dead shape the living. Their choices, traumas, gifts, names, land, debts, stories, and silences continue. Whether or not one believes in literal spirits, ancestry is a form of return. The passage opens into a small space beneath a tree. You're not outside exactly, but you can see roots above you and stars between branches. The tree stands between realms, its trunk rising through an opening in the stone. At its base are tiny offerings, a cup of water, a pinch of grain, a thread tied around a root, a smooth pebble, a child's bead. None of them is grand. All of them are acts of connection. The tree reminds you that return is not reversal. A leaf does not return to being a seed. Dawn does not erase night. A soul that has passed through 7 gates cannot become what it was before the first threshold. If it returns altered, translated into dream, blessing, story, memory, warning, or light. And this may be why ancient myths rarely explain return in a way that satisfies completely. Return belongs to mystery, because it violates the clean line humans draw between here and there. It suggests that endings are real, but not simple. It suggests that the dead are gone, yet not entirely powerless. It suggests that the journey through the gates may be an ending for the body, but also part of a larger cycle that touches the living. The roots grow still. The small offerings fade into shadow. The upward opening above the tree becomes a pale circle, like the first light before sunrise. You do not climb toward it yet. You only stand beneath it, listening to water somewhere under stone and wind somewhere above leaves. No one returns unchanged. Perhaps that is the only answer the old stories are willing to give. The pale circle above the roots becomes a museum light. You do not notice the change all at once. The tree darkens. The roots lose their damp shine. The offerings become shapes behind glass. The scent of earth gives way to polished floors, old wood, climate-controlled air, and the faint mineral stillness of ancient objects kept under careful watch. You're standing again in a room where the dead have been arranged for the living to study. The silence is different here. It is not temple silence. It is not tomb silence. It is institutional, measured, and clean. Footsteps soften against the floor. Small labels sit beside objects. A guard turns page at a desk. Somewhere. A child whispers too loudly and is gently corrected. The air is calm, but not empty. It holds the tension between preservation and distance. This is what the museums keep quiet, not because curators are hiding a single forbidden truth, not because labels are false, not because history is a locked door controlled by unseen hands. The quiet is subtler than that. Museums can tell you the date of an amulet, the dynasty of a coffin, the material of a tablet, the excavation site of a bowl, the language of an inscription, and the likely function of a funerary object. But they cannot fully restore the fear that placed it in a tomb. They cannot bring back the voice that spoke over it. They cannot return the warmth of the hand that last touched it with love. You walk toward a display case where a small funerary figurine stands upright. It is blue-green, delicate, and still. Such figures, often called shabti or ushabti in Egyptian context, depending on period and form, could be placed in tombs to serve the deceased in the afterlife, especially in tasks imagined in the next world. Some are inscribed with spells, some are simple, some are beautifully made. They remind you that ancient afterlife hope was practical as well as spiritual. Even beyond death, there might be fields, labour, commands, and the need for help. The label gives measurements. It cannot explain loneliness. Beside it, a fragment of papyrus shows part of a gate scene. The ink has faded, and the missing section leaves a blankness where a guardian's name may once have been. The label notes that the manuscript is funerary. It may mention the period, provenance if known, and materials. Yet the object itself seems to ask something beyond classification. Did the person who commissioned it believe the words would truly open doors? Did they understand every sign? Did their family watch the papyrus being placed near the body and feel relief, grief, pride, fear, or all of these at once? Scholars can answer some questions and not others. They can compare copies, reconstruct damaged passages, identify motifs, trace changes across dynasties, and study burial practices. They can explain that many funerary objects belong to elite contexts, and that what survives is uneven. They can distinguish between archaeological evidence and later romantic speculation. This work matters deeply. It protects the past from careless fantasy. But even the best scholarship must admit that ancient inward experience often remains partially out of reach. You move to another case. Inside rests a cuneiform tablet, brown and cracked, covered in tight lines. It may record administration, ritual, omen, myth, or lament. Without reading it, you feel the force of writing itself. Clay was once soft enough to receive pressure. A reed stylus once moved through a trained hand. The tablet dried, was stored, broken, buried, found, catalogued, translated, and placed under glass. Its journey may be longer than the life it first served. In Mesopotamian archaeology, countless tablets preserve the concerns of ancient cities: taxes, grain, labour, legal agreements, hymns, school exercises, omens, myths, letters, and rituals. This abundance is a gift, yet also a distortion. Clay survives where other materials vanish. Administrative records may outlast songs sung by mothers, prayers whispered by workers, and stories told beside canals. The archive is vast, but not complete. The museum light makes this incompleteness easy to forget. Objects look final when placed behind glass. Their labels make them feel settled. But the ancient world was not settled. It was noisy, dusty, anxious, intimate, and full of disagreement. Priests debated ritual details. Scribes copied older texts and sometimes misunderstood them. Families worried over burial costs. Kings used religion to shape authority. Ordinary people probably held beliefs that never reached official inscriptions. The dead were mourned in accents no label can reproduce. A curious fringe tidbit appears at the edge of the gallery, not as a claim, but as a mood. Some modern viewers look at these objects and wonder whether museums have reduced sacred technologies into artifacts. A spell becomes literature, a protective figure becomes art, a gate text becomes iconography, a ritual bowl becomes ceramic. In academic terms, this translation is necessary for study. Yet something is lost when an object meant to act is treated only as an object meant to be seen. You pause before a bowl with faint writing around its inner curve. Incantation bowls from late antique Mesopotamia, often inscribed with protective texts, were placed in houses to trap or repel harmful forces. They are later than many of the ancient worlds you have walked through in imagination, but they reveal a continuity of concern. Words, containers, unseen beings, domestic protection, and the belief that writing could shape invisible danger. Some bowls name spirits, angels, demons, clients, and protective formulas. They sit in museums now, quiet and emptied of their original urgency. The label may call them magical, but what did magic mean to the person who buried one under a floor? Protection, fear, hope. A mother trying to keep harm from a child, a household trying to sleep, a family seeking order when illness, grief, or misfortune felt too close. Words like magic and religion can divide practices too neatly. Ancient people may not have sorted their world in the same way. This is one of the open scholarly debates that follows you from case to case. How should modern categories describe ancient practices without forcing them into modern assumptions? Religion, magic, science, medicine, art, literature, myth, law, and ritual were often intertwined. A healing spell could involve medicine. A temple ritual could involve astronomy. A funerary image could be theology and protection, and social status all at once. The museum label must be brief. The past is not. You continue through the gallery. A coffin face looks upward, painted eyes wide and calm. A bronze mirror lies dark. A string of beads rests in a curve like a sleeping serpent. A small boat model waits for water it will never touch. A stone door from a tomb stands against a wall, its false entrance carved for a passage no living body could use. You stand before it and feel the old power of imitation. A false door is not false in the way a lie is false. It is a symbolic doorway, a meeting place between worlds, a surface where offerings, images, and presence could gather. Here, the museum does not hide mystery. It contains more mystery than it can say. Every object has two histories. The first is the ancient history of its making, use, burial, and meaning. The second is the modern history of its discovery, removal, collection, interpretation, display, and sometimes controversy. Many museum collections were shaped by colonial excavation, unequal power, early archaeological practices, antiquities markets, and changing ideas about ownership. Some objects have clear excavation records, others have uncertain or troubling provenance. This, too, is part of what the museum keeps quiet unless the label has room and the institution has chosen to speak openly. The journey of the soul is not the only journey here. Objects also travel through gates, from tomb to soil, from soil to excavation, from excavation to storeroom, from storeroom to museum, from sacred use to public display, from ritual presence to educational artifact. At every threshold, something is gained and something is lost. You stand in the centre of the room and let the cases surround you. The ancient road has not disappeared. It has become smaller, divided among shelves and labels. A gate here, a name there, a guardian in bronze, a spell in ink, a bowl for protection, a statue for service, a fragment of a star ceiling, a broken tablet about a god crossing a boundary. The 7 gates are not preserved in one perfect map. They are scattered across human attempts to protect the dead from loneliness and the living from despair. The lights hum softly above you. You realise that museums are not silent because they have nothing to say. They are silent because the objects speak in incomplete ways. They require patience. They require humility. They require the viewer to stand long enough for the label to become only the first sentence. Behind the glass, a small amulet catches the light. For a moment, it seems almost to glow, not with proof, not with revelation, only with the fragile persistence of human hope, carried through clay, linen, gold, ash, and stone into a room where strangers still come to look for the dead. And as you turn toward the final doorway of the gallery, you feel the museum floor become dust again beneath your feet, as if every preserved object has quietly reopened the road. The doorway of the gallery opens without sound. Beyond it, there is no museum corridor, no sign for another exhibition, no polished bench beneath a white wall. There is only a long field of darkness filled with soft dust and low stars. The floor beneath you is neither stone nor earth, but something between them, firm enough to carry you and faint enough to feel like memory. The air smells of dry clay, extinguished lamps, distant river water, and linen stored for many years in a closed chest. You step forward, and the world becomes quiet in a way that seems older than language. This is the silence beyond the 7th gate, not the silence of absence, not the silence of an empty room after people leave. It is the silence that waits beneath every ancient text when the final line is broken, beneath every tomb when the last mourner returns home, beneath every museum label when the visitor stops reading and simply looks. It is the silence where certainty grows thin, and imagination must become careful. You've walked through names, water, witnesses, stars, forgetting, fire, stillness, guardians, ladders, kings, scales, temples, instructions, dreams, returns, and museum glass. Yet the final mystery has not become smaller. It has become deeper, quieter, and less willing to be held in one hand. Ancient history often teaches this kind of humility. The more you study the records, the more you see how much has vanished. A clay tablet may preserve a myth, but not the voice that first told it. A tomb painting may preserve a journey, but not the heartbeat of the person whose family paid for it. A temple wall may show gods, offerings, and cosmic order, but not every private doubt held by the priest who entered before dawn. The road of the soul survives as fragments because all human memory survives as fragments. You walk through the star field, and the dust rises softly around your feet. Each step seems to stir images from the old world, but none stays long. A reed boat on black water, a scribe pressing signs into clay, a mother placing bread near a grave, a priest washing hands in cold water, a king's name carved into stone, a labourer resting in the shade of a temple wall, a coffin painted with eyes, a bowl hidden under a house floor, a lamp burning in a dream chamber, a child asking where the dead have gone. No single image explains the journey. Together they show the reason it was imagined. Human beings have always needed a shape for departure. Without shape, death is too wide. It becomes a darkness with no edge, a disappearance too large for grief to approach. So ancient people gave it thresholds. They gave it roads, rivers, gates, ladders, courts, names, boats, stars, and rooms. They did not do this because they were simple. They did it because they were human, and the human mind makes pathways through fear. The 7 gates may suggest a cosmic map, a ritual sequence, a symbolic ladder, or a memory of many traditions woven together across time. They may draw from Mesopotamian stories of descent, Egyptian funerary books, later layered heavens, temple architecture, astronomical order, initiation imagery, and the everyday experience of living in cities with walls, doors, guards, records, and inner chambers. One reading of the pattern implies that the soul's journey mirrors the structures ancient people knew best. Yet another reading is gentler. Perhaps the gates are not only about the afterlife. Perhaps they are about becoming light enough to face mystery. The name teaches belonging. The water teaches release. The witnesses teach that life matters. The stars teach that no life moves alone. Forgetting teaches mercy. Fire teaches clarity. Stillness teaches surrender. The guardians teach respect for boundaries. The ladder teaches patience. The scale teaches honesty. The temple teaches that even heaven needs a room in which the heart can rest. Some have wondered whether the 7 gates preserve a very old pattern of inner transformation, one that later cultures dressed in different sacred languages. That possibility cannot be treated as fact. The evidence is too scattered, and the traditions are too distinct. But it remains a meaningful way to listen. When so many cultures imagine passage through stages, it may suggest that human beings instinctively understand change as a series of thresholds. You do not become different all at once. You pass through one door, then another, each asking you to leave behind what cannot travel farther. A cold wind moves across the field. It carries the scent of bitumen, temple smoke, desert stone, and wet reeds. The stars above do not form one familiar sky. Some belong to Mesopotamia, some to Egypt, some to Greece, some to later mystical heavens. Some may belong only to the imagination of those who stared upward from gravesides and rooftops, wondering whether the dead could see the same lights from another side. The scholarly uncertainty remains open. There is no single ancient doctrine called the 7 gates of heaven that can be placed neatly on a timeline and traced without interruption from one civilization to another. There are many gate traditions, many heavens, many underworlds, many numbers, many maps, many prayers, many fears. Some gates lead downward, some lead upward, some guard the sun, some guard the dead. Some appear in tombs, some in myths, some in visions, some in later theology. The pattern is real, but its meaning is plural. This does not weaken the mystery. It makes it more honest. You stop beneath a sky so full of stars that it almost looks like writing. No hand could copy it all. No scribe could finish the tablet. No priest could speak every name. The heavens remain wider than every system built to explain them. This may be why ancient people kept returning to images of gates. A gate admits that there is something beyond the wall, but it does not pretend to show everything at once. It offers passage, not possession. Far ahead, the darkness grows pale. Not dawn exactly, not fire, not the bright reward of a finished story. Only a soft light lying low along the edge of the field, like the inside of a shell. You walk toward it without hurry. The dust no longer clings. The air no longer presses. The road beneath you has become so smooth that it feels less like walking and more like being carried by stillness. You think of all the unnamed dead, the ones without painted papyri, the ones without royal tombs, the ones whose graves were simple, whose names vanished, whose offerings ended, whose bones were moved by flood, plough, time, or careless hands. Perhaps no ancient text preserved their personal gate. Perhaps no museum case holds their amulet. Yet they too belong to the great human question. They too passed from a lit room into darkness. They too were loved by someone, even if that love left no inscription. Maybe the journey of the soul through 7 gates is not only a map for the honoured dead. Maybe it is a way of saying that every life deserves passage. Every grief deserves form, and every forgotten person once stood at the centre of a world. The pale light ahead grows softer. You do not see what lies beyond it. That matters. A hard conclusion would be too small for this road. Ancient texts do not close the mystery, and neither should the night. They leave the soul standing between record and silence, between history and longing, between what can be studied and what can only be approached with care. Perhaps there are gates. Perhaps there are no gates. Only the human need to imagine mercy in stages. Perhaps the dead travel through realms no living language can hold. Perhaps the journey is memory passing from one generation to another, losing weight, keeping warmth, changing shape. It may be that the ancient people who wrote, buried, painted, and prayed were not trying to solve death in the way modern minds demand solutions. They were trying to accompany it. They were building lamps for the edge of the unknown. They were placing words into the hands of the dead and saying, softly, carry these as far as they will go. You stand at the edge of the pale light. Behind you, the 7 gates are no longer visible. They have become dust, star points, museum glass, temple smoke, river water, and the faint impression of a hand pressed into clay. Ahead, there is only quiet. You do not enter. Not yet. The story remains unfinished, as it should. The ancient road does not vanish because it lacks an ending. It becomes more powerful because the ending is hidden. Somewhere beyond the last threshold, silence waits without cruelty. Somewhere beneath the oldest stars, the forgotten dead keep their names in ways no archive can count. Somewhere in the dark, a gate may still be opening, slowly, for every soul that approaches with nothing left to prove, and the night, patient and immense, receives the question. We're at count 1195. The road fades now, not suddenly, not like a lamp blown out, but slowly, the way stars disappear when morning begins before you're ready for it. The gates grow distant, their stones soften, their gardens lower their eyes, the chambers of water, witness, fire, and stillness settle into the deeper quiet where old stories rest after being told. You are no longer walking, you are simply breathing. Around you, the ancient world returns to sleep. The river moves in darkness beside fields of reeds. Mud brick walls cool under moonlight. A lamp burns low in a temple room. Somewhere, a scribe leaves his tablet unfinished. Somewhere, a mourner speaks a name one more time before silence gathers. Somewhere, a museum case holds a small object beneath glass, waiting for another pair of eyes to pause and wonder. Nothing has been solved, and that is all right. Some mysteries are not doors to be forced open. They are thresholds to sit beside, calmly, with respect. The 7 gates remain as images, as questions, as fragments of human hope. They remind you that people long before us looked into death and did not see only emptiness. They saw roads, they saw rivers, they saw names that needed keeping, they saw light beyond difficulty and stillness beyond fear. Let the old images loosen now. Let the clay return to earth. Let the stars return to distance. Let the soul's road become only a soft line in the dark, leading nowhere you need to follow tonight. You can rest here. The ancient voices have grown quiet. The lamps are low, the gates are closed, or perhaps only waiting. The story does not need your answer. It only asks you to drift gently, as countless dreamers have drifted beneath old skies, held for a little while between memory and sleep. End of script. Good night.